Hello, and welcome to this clean, historical Western romance by Martha Gillcrest. It's great to have you with us. Before we begin, be sure to hit the subscribe button, give this audiobook a thumbs up, and share it with friends. Supporting us in this simple way allows us to share more heartwarming romance stories with you for free. Now, get cozy, relax, and escape into adventure and love with a host of new characters. Enjoy. The following book is the copyright of Martha Gillcrest. The Second Best Bride by Martha Gillcrest. Chapter 1, Pennsylvania, 1885. Rose Woodward scraped the ice on the inside of the window, creating a space large enough to see through, and shivered as she peered out to the street below. The first workers were already hurrying along, their collars turned up against the sudden snap of cold weather that had rattled through town the week before, leaving it blanketed in snow. She wriggled into her plain calico dress, trying to ignore the fact that it felt slightly damp against her skin. Yawning loudly, she quickly braided her unruly blonde curls, pausing briefly to look in the fly-speckled mirror that hung next to the door of her small attic room. She wrinkled her nose with frustration. "Still as plain-looking as yesterday," she muttered. "Maybe next year I'll start to look more womanly." She longed for the voluptuous curves and naturally glossy straight hair her sister had, but the fact that she rarely sat still for longer than 5 minutes meant that she was slender, and the serviceable dress hid the swell of her chest and her narrow waist. "Rose, hurry up, would you? It's freezing down here. How can I get a good night's sleep when you let the fires go out?" The voice drifted up the stairs, making Rose jump guiltily for the few seconds she had spent looking at herself. "Sorry, Caroline, I'm coming right now," she called, hurrying down the stairs. She seized the bucket of coal from the corner of the landing and heaved it into the nearest room, which belonged to her sister. "Did you oversleep?" Caroline Woodward's tone was petulant, and Rose bit back a sigh. A bad start to the morning usually meant her sister would probably be in a sullen mood all day. "I didn't think I had, but it was so cold in my room last night that it took me a while to fall asleep. Do you think I could have an extra blanket tonight?" Rose riddled the coals in the fireplace and scooped the ash from beneath the grate into an empty bucket. "Goodness me, you do complain so much," Caroline grumbled. She sat up against the plump pillows behind her and pulled the thick quilt on her bed higher under her chin, shivering dramatically. "If anyone gets to enjoy an extra blanket, it should be me. You know I feel the cold far more than you do." Rose added some lumps of coal to the fire and pumped the bellows, happy to see that, in spite of what Caroline had said, the embers of the fire were still burning, as they had been all night, and the fire quickly crackled back into life, warming the room again. "You'd better make sure that Pa's fire is lit as well," Caroline added, not bothering to say thank you. "That cough of his isn't getting any better, and I'd hate for him to get sick just because you've been idling away your morning upstairs." The clock on Caroline's mantel shelf whirred slightly before the melodic chimes announced it was 6 o'clock in the morning. "What will you be doing today?" Rose asked conversationally. "Are Pa's friends coming over to play cribbage with him?" "I shall be doing what I do every day, Rose, taking care of dear Papa." Caroline sighed and wriggled back under her bed covers. "If you could get him up and give him breakfast, I'll be down later. It's so wearing for me, being here day after day with him." "You're lucky you get to go to work, Rose. It's a nice break for you. You should consider your job a blessing. You have it so much easier than I do." Rose nodded mutely and pulled the door closed quietly behind her as she left Caroline to fall asleep again. Her sister always told her that she needed her beauty sleep, and Rose knew she would never change. "Good morning, Papa." She edged into the room across the hall, tiptoeing across the rug to open the drapes. The gray morning light fell across the figure lying in the bed, and her heart squeezed with love as she took in the gauntness of his cheeks and the thinning white hair that stuck up in wisps on his head. It seemed as though he had aged faster than ever this winter. "Is that you, Caroline? My darling girl? The image of your dear mama." Ezra Woodward blinked sleepily, waking up slowly. "No, it's me, Papa. It's Rose. You know I always get up first. I'm going to stoke the fire to make your room extra cozy. We had fresh snow in the night by the look of things, so you stay in bed and I'll bring a nice bowl of warm oatmeal up for you." She smoothed the quilt and gave her father a gentle smile. "Oh, it's you." Ezra's tone was flat with disappointment. "Well, I suppose I could manage something to eat, but make sure you put more sugar in it. That stuff you gave me yesterday was almost inedible." "Of course, Papa. But last week, you said I made it too sweet." Rose quickly shoveled the ash from his fire and added fresh coal, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. She held her hands out in front of the fire for a moment, letting the warmth seep into her bones and air her dress a little. "You're so contrary," Ezra muttered querulously, peering down at her. "You always were, even as a little girl. I think you make things up, just to show me to be in the wrong," he added. His bushy eyebrows were drawn into a frown. "I'm sorry, Papa, I'll make your oatmeal just how you like it," Rose said hastily, trying to restore the peace. "Your mother was a wonderful cook, just like Caroline, of course. They would have been like 2 peas in a pod if it hadn't been for you coming along and ruining everything." Rose stood up quickly and turned to leave, not wanting her father to see how much his words had hurt her. Rarely a day went by that he didn't find a way to remind her that the love of his life had died giving birth to her. He can't help it. He loved Mama so much. She forced herself to think kind thoughts about her father, telling herself that it was only his own failing health that made him more bad-tempered than usual. He seemed to want to lay all the blame for the family's misfortunes at Rose's feet. 18 long years I've had to be reminded of everything we lost when you were born," Ezra mumbled to himself. "I said our family was perfect after we had Caroline, and it was just the 3 of us, but your mother wanted a little boy as well." He turned his rheumy eyes toward Rose as she lifted the ash bucket and went to leave. "I suppose it's not really your fault, but I don't think you'll ever amount to much, which is rather a disappointment. I'm just grateful Caroline is such a devoted daughter to me in my old age." His mouth lifted in a faint smile as he thought about his eldest daughter and drifted off to sleep again, his body still exhausted from the ailments that troubled him every winter. Rose bustled around the kitchen, stoking the range to get it warm and filling the blackened kettle with water to make a pot of coffee. She had already prepared the oatmeal the night before, so it just needed to be heated through. She spooned a small amount into her mouth, trying to guess whether it would be sweet enough to meet her father's request. In truth, his memory was starting to fail him, and he would probably have forgotten what he'd said by the time she took it upstairs and helped him eat it. As she waited for the oatmeal to heat through, Rose made a start peeling the vegetables for the stew before getting to work on chopping up the meat. From years of practice, she was a proficient cook, adding a grind of pepper and a pinch of spices to the dish to make it more flavorsome. "Caroline's a good cook, huh?" If only he realized who actually prepares all the food we eat. The thought slid into her mind, and she couldn't help feeling a tinge of resentment that her sister happily accepted their father's compliments about the meals they ate at night, without ever correcting him that it had been Rose who did most of the work. All Caroline bothered with was a few stirs with the wooden spoon, or putting it in the range for the last half hour of cooking at night. Rose was astonished that in all these years their father had never noticed that she prepared their meals every morning before going to work. "There's no point lamenting over things that can't be changed," she muttered to herself as the kitchen filled with the mouth-watering aromas of browning meat. "That's just the way Caroline is." She hummed a tune, enjoying the quietness of the morning. Although it was obvious that their father favored Caroline, Rose was so used to it that she had accepted it. Like the way the rain blew in from the ocean in the fall and the snow followed not long after, it was her birth that had caused the demise of their happy family, and that remained an unchangeable fact that she just had to live with. "I'm sorry, Ma. I would have liked to have known you," she whispered, pausing to look at the small watercolor painting of her mother that hung on the wall near the kitchen table. Her dark violet eyes looked kind, and Rose could see why Ezra was reminded of her whenever he looked at Caroline, because they were so similar. As she ladled the oatmeal into a bowl for her father, Rose's mind drifted back to something which had been seared into her, like a steer being branded, so that it had become part of the very fabric of who she was. "You're like a cuckoo in our nest," Caroline had nonchalantly told her when Rose had only been 5 years old. "You don't look like me and Mama. You don't even look much like Papa." She had tossed her glossy chestnut hair and given Rose an impassive stare. "Papa loves me best, and you second best. That's just the way it is, Rose, so you'll have to get used to it." Rose had tucked her thumb in her mouth and nodded, accepting the words without question. Caroline was beautiful and 3 years older than her, so she must be right, she had figured. Chapter 2. Pennsylvania. The sharp, cold wind made Rose's nose tingle and eyes water, and each outward breath left a trail of vapor behind her. As per usual, she was hurrying to get to work. Even though she made sure to rise early enough to get the fires going, prepare dinner for the evening, and give Ezra a warming breakfast, Caroline invariably added some additional task that would upset her plans to take a leisurely walk to work. This morning, once her bedroom had warmed up, Caroline had eventually gotten up and strolled into the kitchen, wondering why Rose hadn't aired her best gown for her. "I definitely told you last night that I needed it done," Caroline had insisted, folding her arms resolutely. "Benjamin Robertson has invited me to a music recital, and I have to wear the blue gown, Rose. You know it shows off my coloring so well." "I would have remembered to do it if you'd asked," Rose had shot back, already tying her shawl over her shoulders to go to work. "I'll get it out from the closet this evening. I'm sure it won't be too creased." Caroline's mouth had narrowed into a thin line, hardening her pretty features. "How will I ever find a suitable husband if you're determined to be so unsupportive? It's almost as if you don't want me to marry well." Her violet eyes suddenly pooled with tears, making Rose feel guilty, even though she knew Caroline hadn't asked her to get the gown out already. "Don't be upset," Rose had said hastily. "I'll hang it up now so the creases have all day to drop out, and I can press it a little if needed, as soon as I get back from work." She had scurried up the stairs again, pulling out the shot silk gown from the wardrobe and fluffing the ruffles of the skirt so that it billowed out to its full hourglass shape on the hanger. The fabric was slightly iridescent, reminding Rose of peacock feathers, and she had held it up against herself for a moment, imagining what it would be like to wear something so beautiful. "Hey, look where you're going, will you?" The shouted words snapped Rose back to the present as one of the costermongers barged past her with his handcart, splattering her dress with dirty slush from where the wagons had been rolling along the road already. "So much for me wearing a gorgeous silk gown," she murmured, waving apologetically to him. "I can't even keep my gray work dress looking clean and tidy on the way to work." Her mouth curved into a wry smile, and she shook the slush from her hem. Thankfully, it hadn't stained the fabric, and the long apron she wore at work would cover the damp patches. She rounded the corner, and her spirits lifted as she glimpsed the tall gold lettering on the building in front of her. Sutton Brothers Tea Company. She was never happier than when she was at the place where she had been working for the last 2 years. Not only did it provide her with a modest income each week to help keep the family afloat, but more importantly, it was the place where she was fortunate enough to have made 2 good friends who helped her forget all the careless put-downs and comments about her inadequacies at home. A few minutes later, she tied her apron tightly around her waist and hurried across the cavernous warehouse, clutching a pencil and paper to tally the new stock that had arrived from the docks overnight. "Good morning, Rose. If you could do that and then go in the store to serve customers afterward, please." Abe Sutton peered out from his office high overhead, where he had a view across the whole warehouse to check that she had heard his request. "Yes, Mr. Sutton?" She nodded and set about her task, recording the crates of tea, sacks of coffee beans, and bags of spices. She carefully noted all the details, opening each one to check that they were in good condition. The pale winter sun spilled through the windows, and the pungent scent of the exotic spices from far-off lands made Rose smile as she worked her way along the end of the warehouse. Her favorite was the warm, rich scent of cinnamon, and she took an appreciative sniff, trying to imagine what it was like where all these spices came from. Mr. Sutton had once shown her some pictures of India in a book to help her learn more about what they sold. The brightness of their clothes had seemed like a carnival explosion of color compared to the sensible dresses she wore. "Hello, Rose. How are you today? Shall I help you, or have you finished?" Elmer Ratchford swallowed as he appeared from the shadows, making his Adam's apple bob nervously above his starched shirt collar. His eyes lit up when Rose darted a grin in his direction. "I won't be much longer, Elmer. How about you put the kettle on the stove to boil, and we can have a cup of coffee when I bring this through to the office in a minute." Elmer hurried away, eager to do as she had asked. He had recently been promoted from office boy to junior clerk, and his new position had made him bolder to try and show Rose how much he cared for her. Rose watched his retreating back fondly. When she had first started working at Sutton's, she had felt so nervous that she hadn't uttered a word to anyone for her first few weeks. Caroline had drummed it into her every morning how disappointed their father would be if she did anything to lose the job, and she had thrown herself into the unfamiliar work, determined not to let her family down. As she completed the final few sacks of spices, a memory of her third week at Sutton's drifted into her mind, and Rose shuddered slightly at the recollection. Ezra had been suffering from a fever, and she had been up all night, mopping his brow with a cool cloth and helping him with sips of water. The fever had broken just before dawn, and Rose had fallen into a fitful doze in the chair at his bedside. When she had jerked awake, she had been horrified to see that she would be late getting to work. She had snatched up her shawl and run through the streets without pausing for breakfast. Elmer had been looking anxiously up and down the street, wondering where she was. Without asking what had happened, he had helped her slip into the warehouse through the back entrance, without attracting attention from the manager, who would have dismissed her instantly. "Where have you been?" Mr. Plummer had asked icily when he saw her shortly afterward. "Were you late this morning, Miss Woodward? You know our rules on punctuality. A business cannot run on the whims of whenever you care to show up to work." I was just going to explain." Rose had started to stutter a reply, already dreading telling her father that she hadn't lasted longer than a couple of weeks. "She was helping me do the stock check," Elmer had interjected, nodding firmly. "The last delivery was so large, I thought it would be good for Rose to help me so we could get things into the store quicker to sell. The customers love the new teas and coffees so much that the girls in the store can hardly keep up." "What a grand idea," Abe Sutton had said, overhearing the conversation as he wandered past. "I like the way you think of new ideas, young Elmer. You'll go a long way at Sutton's if you carry on like that." He had slapped Abe on the back, making him blush. "Thank you, sir. I think we should let Rose help with all the stock checks from now on, don't you, Mr. Plummer? Many hands make light work." Abe had hurried away, leaving his manager scratching his head in confusion. "We don't usually encourage women to come into the warehouse," Mr. Plummer had said, glancing after Mr. Sutton's retreating figure with a puzzled look. "I suppose if that's what he wants, I suppose we could." He shrugged and gave Elmer and Rose a hard stare. "I don't want any funny business, though. You get the job done as quickly as possible, and I'll be checking up to make sure you don't make any mistakes." From that day on, Rose knew that she had found an ally in Elmer, and they had been firm friends ever since. But what she had been too innocent to realize was that Elmer had grown fonder of Rose with each passing week. And now that he had had a small increase in pay to go with his promotion, he was determined to ask her to walk out with him, just as soon as he could pluck up the courage. Rose sipped on the dark coffee, savoring the nutty taste, sitting in her favorite chair in the small room they used for their breaks. Unlike some of the horror stories she heard about other employers in town, Abe and Joel Sutton were fair with their staff. They encouraged them to drink the tea and coffee blends they made, so they would tell their friends how good they tasted. And Rose knew that it had been a blessing when she had seen the small advertisement in the window saying that they were looking for new people to work for them. You'll never guess what. Rose raised one eyebrow mysteriously at her friend, Betty, who had joined her and Elmer for their break. "Don't tease us," Betty replied, giggling. "I think Caroline has a beau. Rose confided. None other than Benjamin Robertson. He's taking her to a music recital. She's already picked out her gown that she wants to wear for it. Betty sighed dreamily. I wish someone would invite me to a recital. She shot Rose a mischievous glance. Perhaps I could come to your house to help Caroline get ready for her evening? Benjamin Robertson is the most eligible bachelor in this neighborhood, and quite the most handsome man I've ever seen. Trust me, you won't want to be anywhere near Caroline when she's preparing for an evening with a new beau, she chuckled. You'd think she was going to a coming-out ball or something. Everything has to be just so, and it takes her nearly all day to prepare. But I enjoy helping her, she added quickly. She looks so beautiful in all her finery, and it makes her happy. She works hard caring for Papa. Helping her get ready so she can enjoy an evening out is the least I can do. Elmer sipped his coffee, saying nothing. In his view, Caroline sounded rather spoilt, but Rose wouldn't hear a word against her. He sipped his coffee again, glancing sideways at Rose as she described Caroline's gown to Betty. Some of her blonde curls had escaped from their braid, as they did most days, and framed her face, making her look wonderful, he thought. She had a dusting of freckles across her rosy cheeks, and her hazel eyes often softened with kindness when she spoke about her family. When they were married, he would tell her every day how beautiful she was. Elmer thought unexpectedly, feeling suddenly rather flustered as the idea took form in his mind. Well, I have to get back to work, he said quickly, hoping that Rose and Betty wouldn't notice his embarrassment. We do too, come on, Rose. That's enough daydreaming about Benjamin. Betty stood up and stretched. The high society ladies are clamoring for the new Lapsang blend of tea, Elmer. You should tell Mr. Plummer that we mustn't run out. Apparently, it's all the rage for their tea parties. At this rate, Rose and I might get a little bonus and be able to buy a new bonnet each for the summer. Betty giggled again as the two of them hurried away to take their place behind the counter in the store, ready to serve their customers. The next few hours passed quickly. Serving customers was Rose's favorite part of the job, even though it had taken her a while to feel confident enough to make suggestions when they didn't know which blend of coffee or spice mix to choose. Betty's bubbly sales patter had helped her learn what to say, and although Rose knew she was quieter by comparison, many of their regular customers valued her thoughtful recommendations and the way she would ask after their family. The door tinkled to announce a new customer's arrival, and she looked up from where she was replenishing the twine they used to wrap their parcels. It's Mrs. Robertson, Benjamin's mother. You serve her, Betty mouthed, giving Rose a nudge. Can I help you, ma'am? Rose had long since given up wondering how Betty seemed to know who every single person was who came into the store. It's Mrs. Robertson, isn't it? She added politely. Abe encouraged them to use the personal touch, and she smiled as the woman turned. Why, thank you, dear. I don't usually do my own shopping, but my housekeeper is indisposed today, and I was in town for a dress fitting. I'm looking for a nice blend of tea to serve for the ladies in my sewing circle. I always used to serve Earl Grey, but not everyone likes that. Rose bustled out from behind the counter and guided her along the shelves, pointing out the different tea blends. This one is very refreshing, or this is nice for a stronger cup of tea. She watched the woman surreptitiously as she peered at each label. Her clothes were elegantly made, and she had that indefinable air of understated wealth about her that Rose had come to recognize. Caroline would want to know every detail, and Rose hid her smile at the coincidence that she had met Benjamin's mother before her. How interesting. The ladies in New York all speak very highly of our new Lapsang blend, Mrs. Robertson. Perhaps you would like to try that with your regular Darjeeling order as well? Rose pulled the large jar of tea leaves down and opened it to show her, letting the smoky scent waft out. The ladies of New York, you say? Mrs. Robertson gave Rose an amused look. Well, we don't want to get left behind, do we? I'll take both as you suggest. She slid some money across the counter and put the parcels in her basket. Tell Mr. Sutton his staff are most helpful, she added as she left. Good old-fashioned service goes a long way, and it's nice to see both of you doing it so politely. As soon as it was closing time, Betty slid the blind down on the door and locked up. You might be invited to Mrs. Robertson's sewing circles if Benjamin and Caroline get married, she said with a hint of envy in her voice. She was so elegant and charming. Imagine someone as wealthy as her being your mother-in-law. Rose paused for a moment from sweeping the floor. Wealth isn't everything, Betty. I just hope he makes Caroline happy. That's what matters more. She resumed her sweeping, sending eddies of dust into the air before scooping it up in a dustpan. When do you think we'll be walking out with our own beaux? Betty said, daydreaming again as she straightened the jars of tea on the shelves. She grinned and looked toward the door that led into the offices behind the store. I reckon Elmer might be asking you to be his beau any day now, Rose. I've seen the way his eyes go all misty when he looks at you. Don't be so silly, she replied hastily. Do you really think so? She blushed, but the feeling of warmth in her chest at Betty's words was nice. Elmer was a kind and decent young man, even though she knew Caroline would consider him to be very unexciting. Betty tapped the side of her nose and grinned. If I were a betting woman, I'd say you'll have a sweetheart by summer. She sighed dramatically. Just don't forget all about me when you fall in love. Maybe Elmer has a handsome cousin tucked away somewhere that we don't know about, she added with a giggle. Rose took her apron off and hung it behind the counter, ready for the following day. Before we get carried away, the first thing I need to do is help Caroline prepare for her big night out with Benjamin. Let's hope it all goes smoothly. Caroline does suffer with her nerves, and she's terrified she's going to be left as a spinster, caring for Papa. See you tomorrow. Betty waved her off. Rose's thoughts about her sister whirled in her mind as she hurried home. I hope Benjamin likes her. I don't want Caroline to be let down. But I hope she will be kind to him, too. She knew that Caroline was highly strung and not reticent about letting people know if she was displeased. She could only hope that Benjamin was man enough to handle her mercurial moods. Chapter 3. Pennsylvania. What do you mean? You've already met Benjamin's mother? Caroline's mouth gaped open in surprise as she stared at Rose in the mirror. It was Betty who knew who she was. She came into the store the other day, and I helped her choose a new tea blend for when her sewing friends visit. She seemed very nice. Caroline groaned before Rose could finish her sentence. She jumped up from the chair, not caring that Rose was in the middle of curling her ringlets. This is a disaster, she wailed, pacing back and forth in her bedroom like a caged lion. What sort of family do you suppose Benjamin will think we are if he finds out you're just a common store girl who has already served his mama? It's not common to go out to work to help our family, Caroline. Rose felt the familiar prickle of shame from being put down that Caroline's words often gave her. But she reminded herself that Caroline had a delicate disposition. She bit her lip to stop herself from saying something else that might spoil her sister's evening. What was she like? I suppose you may as well tell me everything, just so I'm forewarned. Caroline sat back down sulkily and handed Rose the brush so she could continue doing her hair for her. Well, she was very interested to learn about the different teas, and she said that Betty and I provided very good service. I'm not interested in that, Caroline interrupted. I mean, what was she really like? Does she look well off? What was she wearing? Rose deftly curled a lock of Caroline's silky hair, admiring the way it gleamed in the lamplight. She said she doesn't usually shop herself. Her housekeeper does it, but she couldn't go that day. Her dress was lovely, as I recall. A very fetching red velvet, and yes, she did seem like someone with wealth, but not in a showy sort of way. Caroline added a little rouge to her cheeks and gave a self-satisfied smile. That's what I've heard, too. The Robertsons have inherited wealth, which all the best people do, of course. It's far less common than earning it through trade. They're a very well-respected family in town, so I have to make sure everything is perfect for my evening out with Benjamin. Chances like this don't come along often. What do you mean? Rose mumbled through a mouthful of hairpins. I intend for Benjamin to find me irresistible and ask me to be his wife, of course, Caroline explained, as though Rose was a simpleton. As long as you like each other, surely? I mean, you don't really know each other yet, do you? Caroline waved her hand dismissively. Why on earth wouldn't he like me? And as for me liking him, Well, he comes from a family with money, and he's delightfully handsome, which is more than enough. I'm going to make all the other women who know him green with envy," she added with a tinkling laugh. Rose thought about Elmer and the easy companionship they felt together at work. It seemed as though Caroline wasn't bothered about whether she liked Benjamin, so much as the status of being with him would give her. She wondered if he took after his mama, who she had seen was a kind person. As if reading her thoughts, Caroline suddenly pouted. "I think it's best if Benjamin doesn't meet you for a while, at least until he's besotted with me and can't imagine being with anyone else. If he realizes you're just someone who works in a tea and coffee store, it might lower his opinion of the family. Papa was a successful businessman before his health declined, so that's okay. But you? Well, I think it's best if you stay out of the way for a while." Rose nodded slowly. There was no point in trying to go against Caroline's wishes. "I have a huge pile of mending to be getting on with anyway," she said brightly. "I'm sure you'll tell me all about him when you get home." Caroline had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "It's not that I don't think highly of you, Rose. If I marry well, it will help our family. As the pretty one in the family, it's up to me to attract a good husband. You're lucky you don't need to worry about such things," she added with another tinkling laugh. "Well, Betty thinks that Elmer is sweet on me," Rose muttered back, surprising herself at being so bold. "Elmer the clerk?" Caroline looked surprised. "He seemed very dull that time I came to visit you in the store." She fastened a velvet choker around her neck and admired the way it showed off her décolletage. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Rose. You're far too young to be having romantic notions. Besides, how would it look if you got married before me?" Her eyes clouded with worry. "I expect Betty is just gossiping for the sake of it. In fact, I must insist you put Elmer completely out of your mind. We don't want him getting the wrong idea and you ending up being made a fool of. I'm sure he doesn't really want to be your beau." "I expect you're right. We're just good friends, and he always sticks up for me when Mr. Plummer is in a bad mood." Caroline patted Rose's hand on her shoulder. "I know more about matters of the heart than you, and I'd hate to see you getting hurt when Elmer chooses someone else to marry. Your time will come one day, Rose, but not yet. It wouldn't be right." A sharp rap on the door made Rose jump. She glanced at the clock, seeing that it was a good half an hour until Benjamin was due to call for Caroline. "It must be one of the neighbors," Caroline called from their small parlor. "You can answer the door, Rose, but don't stand there chatting and wasting time. Papa is probably waiting for you to read to him, wondering where you are." Rose quickly dried her soapy hands on a tea towel and hurried to see who it was, opening the door wide onto the dark night. "Good evening. I'm Benjamin Robertson." The tall gentleman at the top of their steps extended a hand and gave Rose a small nod. "You must be Caroline's sister?" He took her hand firmly and shook it. Rose gulped, momentarily lost for words. Benjamin was a head taller than her, and his black hair was swept back from a high forehead. His brown eyes were warm, just like his mother's, and the corner of his mouth lifted with the hint of a smile at her surprise. "Oh, yes, I'm Rose. Caroline is expecting you," she stuttered. Her heart skipped a beat. Betty had been right when she had said Benjamin was good-looking, but Rose felt more drawn to the way his eyes crinkled as he smiled broadly at her, as though he was genuinely pleased to meet her. "I'm a little bit early," he whispered with a conspiratorial grin, glancing down the hallway. "I hope Caroline won't mind. I was so looking forward to seeing her again, and I thought I might meet your father. My pa speaks very highly of Ezra Woodward." There was a sudden rustle of silk behind Rose. "Benjamin, how lovely to see you. I was just reading in the parlor," Caroline said in a sultry tone. "Thank you, Rose. You don't need to stay here. I think Papa was calling for you. I'll see you later. We should go now, Benjamin. We don't want to be late." She edged past Rose, pushing her out of the way. "Is your father available to say hello to?" Benjamin took his hat off and stepped over the threshold. "We don't need to leave straight away, and my pa wanted to send his regards. They used to do business together, I believe." Caroline frowned, but then recovered herself. "Of course, come into the parlor, and Rose can fetch him." She ushered Benjamin into the parlor and hurried back out into the hallway. I don't want him to meet Papa. He's not well enough, and his mind might wander, she hissed. Rose placed a steadying hand on Caroline's arm. She could tell that her sister was getting agitated, that the night wasn't going as she'd planned, and 2 spots of color had appeared on her cheeks, making her look flustered. Why don't you offer Benjamin a small glass of port, and I'll come back in a minute and say that Papa is asleep already. Caroline nodded hastily and hurried back to the parlor, while Rose tiptoed back to the kitchen, waiting for a few minutes. She was disappointed that Caroline didn't want Benjamin to meet their father. He would have enjoyed a few minutes reminiscing about his time in business, and he saw few enough people these days. She paced back and forth, leaving a decent amount of time for their plan to be plausible. Once enough time had elapsed, she went back, doing her best not to catch Caroline's eye. I'm sorry, Benjamin. Papa is already asleep, but I'm sure he'd like to see you next time. Maybe if you visit a little earlier in the day. Rose hoped that her face didn't betray their deception. That's a great idea, Benjamin replied warmly. What do you say, Caroline? Your pa was quite the shrewd businessman in his day, so people tell me. Caroline fluttered her fan to cover her nerves. People do speak highly of him, but his health isn't what it used to be. Should we leave now? I'm so looking forward to the recital. Benjamin stretched his hands toward the fire and took another sip of his port, in no particular hurry. You didn't tell me you had a younger sister, he said, smiling at Rose. What do you do, Rose? I have a job, Rose mumbled. She could feel the force of Caroline's stare on her, but Benjamin's interested expression invited her to say more. I've been working at the Sutton Brothers Tea Company for 2 years now. I really enjoy it, and they're very nice people to work for. There's always something different happening every day, and the customers like to find out about the teas and spices. I'm sure Benjamin won't be interested in your little job, Rose, Caroline trilled, anxious to change the subject. Tell us more about your family, Benjamin. You're so smart. Your father must be very proud of you. Benjamin chuckled. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But I'm not so sure. Pa wants me to follow in his footsteps in importing, but all I've ever really wanted to do is something with the railroads. Papa can't understand why, but I like the idea of the trains connecting this vast country of ours. He took another sip of his port, and his eyes twinkled as he looked at Rose again. You know what? Mama said she had been most impressed by one of the girls who helped her at Sutton's recently. That wasn't you, was it? Rose blushed pink at the unexpected compliment. Well, I did help your mother, yes. I mean, I didn't realize it was her right away. It's rather a coincidence, but it was nothing, honestly. I just enjoy helping the customers. She gets her helpful nature from me, Benjamin, Caroline said hastily, keen to steer his attention back to herself. Our mama died in childbirth. Poor Rose. It wasn't completely her fault, of course, but I've always been very strict about teaching Rose to think of others. It comes naturally to me, but I like to pass on those sorts of values. Caroline reached across and laid her hand lightly on Benjamin's arm, looking up at him with a soulful gaze. My dear Caroline, it must have been so difficult for you, losing your mother and raising Rose. I can tell you've done a marvelous job. His smile softened as he looked at her. Well, I'd better get on with my chores, Rose said lightly. Have a wonderful time at the recital. I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. She bobbed a quick goodbye and scurried away, feeling suddenly like a spare part. He certainly seems smitten by her, Misty. The silvery-coated cat that Rose had adopted when it kept coming to their door and meowing for food stretched luxuriously in front of the stove and purred as Rose bent to scratch under her chin. We can have a nice quiet evening by the fire, can't we? Maybe I can read my book without any interruptions for a change. The cat purred again and wound itself around Rose's ankles, making her smile. It looked as though Benjamin was the perfect match for Caroline, but more importantly, Rose had the feeling that he was a kind and thoughtful person. She hoped that Caroline wouldn't take his good nature for granted, as she had with several other gentlemen who had fallen by the wayside, trying to keep up with her demands. Let's hope Benjamin is the right person for her, this time, Rose whispered to the cat. Or perhaps, let's hope Caroline is the best person for Benjamin. Someone like him deserves someone nice. The surprising thought slid into Rose's mind, and she smiled to herself, recognizing that Caroline was no shrinking violet when it came to love. She knew what she wanted, and she wouldn't rest until she had made it happen. Of that, Rose was quite sure. Chapter 4. Pennsylvania. The hacking cough rattled Ezra's frame as he gasped for breath. "I don't know why I can't seem to shake this off," he muttered, once he could speak again. His cheeks looked gaunt in the late spring sunshine that flooded through the window, and Rose held a glass of herbal tonic to his lips so that he could take a few sips. "Maybe I could take you out to the park, Papa? The fresh air might do you good." Rose pressed a hand to his forehead, not liking the feel of heat under her palm. His eyes seemed unnaturally bright, which didn't bode well either. "Don't fuss, child." Ezra batted her hand away and frowned. "Why hasn't Caroline been to see me today? I miss her, and my darling wife. Where is she?" He looked at Rose with puzzlement, as though he couldn't quite recall who she was. "Caroline is out with Benjamin, Papa. Remember I told you he was taking her out for the day? They're having a picnic, and then he wants to show her the new locomotive at the railroad station. Apparently, it's the most amazing one he's ever seen. Almost like a hotel on wheels," Benjamin said. "A locomotive?" Ezra frowned. "What on earth would Caroline want with that? He should be marrying her by now instead of dawdling around this way. I hope his intentions are honorable." Rose spent a few moments putting fresh sheets on her father's bed once she had made him comfortable in the armchair by the window. His words echoed almost exactly what Caroline had said over breakfast that morning, and Rose knew she was becoming impatient with Benjamin's lack of urgency. "Maybe he wants to make sure you're well-suited before asking you to marry him," Rose had said to Caroline, pouring 2 cups of tea out. "To be honest, I find his fascination with trains and railroads insufferably boring," Caroline had confessed, rolling her eyes. "I almost told him I had a headache and couldn't go. At least I won't have to pretend to be interested as soon as we're married. I'll be too busy overseeing our new home. I've got such grand plans for it, Rose. I'll order the finest fabrics for our drapes, and I already have my eye on some wonderful pieces of furniture." She had cast a critical look around their kitchen. "I don't think I'll take much from here. Everything looks far too shabby for a woman of my standing." Rose had followed her gaze. She had made most of the cushions herself and knitted the soft blankets they put over their knees in the evening to stay cozy, and could understand how Caroline might think them too homemade for a life with Benjamin. Ezra's coughing brought her back to the present again, and she wondered whether they should send for the doctor yet. "You'll carry on working when Caroline marries, I expect," he said, glancing in her direction with a less confused look on his face. "Maybe I'll find a beau, too," Rose replied. An image of Elmer drifted into her head. Lately, he had been using the smallest excuse to come and find her in the warehouse, and Betty was convinced he would be asking her to walk out with him any day now. "Well, don't get your hopes up," Ezra muttered. "Caroline has been such a devoted daughter to me since I became ill and had to sell the business. It's only right that she should focus her time on being a wife as soon as Benjamin asks for her hand. Someone needs to keep a bit of money coming in, so it will just have to be you." He shrugged slightly. "She's not made of such strong stuff as you, Rose. Caroline needs an easier life, and it's your duty to do what you can to help her have it." Rose smoothed the quilt over Ezra's bed, thinking about his words. "So you're saying I shouldn't get married?" she asked in a quiet voice. She felt her hopes of having a cozy little home of her own and the love of a good man shrivel. "Correct," Ezra replied crisply. "Caroline tells me a young clerk at Sutton's might harbor romantic notions about you. As your father, I must insist that you don't encourage him. The only thing that matters at the moment is Caroline's happiness." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and he gave her a hard stare, waiting for her nod of agreement. "Yes, Papa, of course." Rose wrapped the blanket carefully around his shoulders and chafed some warmth back into his blue-veined hands, trying to ignore the feeling of disappointment that curdled in her stomach. "Elmer is a kind man. He'll wait." Rose comforted herself with the thought that even though she didn't know when it might happen, one day the Lord would bring love into her life. I have wonderful news. Caroline burst into the kitchen later that day and skidded to a halt in front of Rose. Benjamin proposed. He's finally asked me to be his wife, Rose. She swept Rose into a hug and jumped up and down, making them both laugh with giddy delight. Oh, Caroline, I'm so happy for you. Rose held her sister at arm's length, thinking she had never seen her look so happy. Her eyes were shining and her cheeks were flushed with excitement. You see, going to look at the locomotive with him was the right thing to do. Tell me all about it. Caroline paced around the kitchen as Rose put the finishing touches to their evening meal. It was so romantic. You know he spent an hour with Papa last week talking about the good old days? Well, that's when he asked Papa if he could marry me, and they've been keeping it secret since then. She shook her head, chuckling. And today, what did Benjamin say? We went to see that locomotive, but I told Benjamin I was feeling tired. So he insisted we should go to the most expensive place in town for luncheon. And just as we were about to go in, he asked me to marry him. We even had champagne with our food. Caroline clasped her hands to her chest, sighing with pleasure. Finally, I can live the life I was always destined for. I'll be someone of importance, Rose. Entertaining the ladies of high society, going to the theater, and dining out regularly, instead of being stuck at home taking care of Papa. She did a little spin, imagining herself dancing at a grand ball, then sat down at the kitchen table with a happy sigh. Have you set a date? There will be so much to prepare. Rose cut 3 slices of raised pie and plated them up, adding some vegetables on the side, as Caroline twirled one of her ringlets with a dreamy expression on her face. I've persuaded him that it would be best for us to marry as quickly as possible. There's no need for us to have a long engagement. Caroline's eyes clouded slightly. The only thing is, I sometimes wonder if Benjamin lacks ambition. He always seems to take so long to make his mind up about things. She shivered slightly. There are so many other high society ladies who he could have chosen to marry. I don't want his mother getting any ideas that he would be better off with someone else. She darted her sister a look of concern. Surely Benjamin's parents are happy for both of you? Of course, she replied sharply. I'll just feel happier to know that we're married and my new life can begin as soon as possible without him getting tempted by anyone else. Papa will be delighted. Rose paused from laying up his dinner tray. I'm worried about him, Caroline. Usually he gets better once winter is over, but this year he seems to be getting worse. His breathing sounds so labored, and he's not sleeping well. I had to get up 3 times last night to give him a drop of laudanum to ease the pain. Do you think we should get the doctor? Caroline sighed dismissively. Do what you feel is best, Rose. I can't think about it while I have so much to plan for my wedding. Her expression brightened again. Benjamin's father owns a lovely house at the edge of town in addition to where they live themselves. It's just sitting there empty. I'm sure that's where we'll be living. It's a much more genteel neighborhood than here. I can't wait. What about me and Papa? Will we come with you? Rose felt a sudden ripple of anxiety about her future. She couldn't see how she would be able to care properly for Ezra and continue working at the same time if it were all down to her. Oh, we'll figure that out all in good time, Caroline said airily. I wonder how soon I can have a dress fitting, she added, already consumed with thoughts of the wedding. I've dreamt of a beautiful wedding for so long. Everything has to be absolutely perfect. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as the wedding drew near. Betty insisted on hearing about every detail as she and Rose ate their lunch at work, with a rapt expression on her face as Rose described the dress and flowers. Caroline is going to look like a princess, and Benjamin will probably whisk her away for romantic days out. Betty sighed with longing. I wish something that exciting would happen to me. One of the boys who works at the paper mill is sweet on me, but it's not quite the same, is it? She pulled a face and picked at her lunch. Caroline does rather think she's a bit different from the rest of us now that she's marrying Benjamin, Rose conceded. He's very down to earth, though, she added. His family is quite wealthy, but he's not really interested in working with his father. What about you and Ezra? Will you go and live with them? Elmer sipped his coffee and looked at Rose over his cup. You won't move away and forget all about us, will you? Betty suddenly blurted out, looking worried. Rose patted her hand. Of course not. I'll still be working here and looking after Papa as well as I can. His health is declining, though. I'm not sure how I'll manage or where we'll live. She blinked as tears pricked the back of her eyes. We'll always look out for you, Elmer said quickly. You won't be left alone. We'll make sure of that, won't we, Betty? He had a feeling that Caroline would move on to her new life without a second thought for Rose, and his heart squeezed with pity for her. Can I walk you home this evening? He asked quickly before he lost his nerve. There's something I'd like to talk to you about. Oh, yes, Rose stuttered, turning pink. Isn't it out of your way, though? She jumped as Betty kicked her under the table. I mean, thank you, yes, that would be very nice. A few hours later, Elmer and Rose strolled through the streets, taking the longer route home that took them past the park at Elmer's suggestion. You work so hard, Rose. I'm sure Caroline wouldn't begrudge you a few minutes to enjoy some sunshine. She smiled as a pair of children darted past to go and feed the ducks at the pond as their governess hurried after them, trying to keep up. I remember Papa used to take us to the park when we were little girls, she said, feeling suddenly nostalgic. Maybe you'll do the same with your children one day, Elmer replied, making her blush slightly. I've been thinking about Caroline getting married and your pa being ill. I'm sorry if I've been a bit distracted at work, Elmer. There's such a lot happening at the moment. Oh, I don't mean that, Elmer said hastily. I mean, would you consider? Elmer swallowed before trying again. He stopped suddenly and turned to face Rose. I'd like to take care of you, Rose. Would you walk out with me? And as soon as I've saved some more money, would you marry me? He finished in a rush, turning red with the effort of getting his words out. Rose hesitated as a rush of emotion swept over her. I want to say yes, Elmer. She hung her head for a moment, remembering what her father and Caroline had said to her. The thing is, Papa is very ill and he needs all my attention, and Caroline's nerves are stretched to breaking point at the moment, what with the wedding coming up. Elmer took her hand bashfully and squeezed it. I understand, Rose, but one day, soon, I think we would have a good marriage, don't you? I know I'm not the most exciting person, but I do care for you very much. She smiled at him and nodded. I'd like that, Elmer, and thank you for understanding. They walked on in companionable silence for a while. Caroline's wedding is only a couple of weeks away, Rose said as they arrived at her house. After that, things might become a bit easier. She saw the hope flare in Elmer's eyes and smiled at him. I sure hope so, Rose. It's about time you thought of yourself for once, instead of just being at Caroline's beck and call. He took her hand and squeezed it again, giving her an earnest look. Rose waved him goodbye and skipped up the steps with a huge grin. Thank you, Lord. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Elmer and I will make a happy life together, guided by your grace. She didn't notice Caroline watching them from the parlor window, or the way her mouth pinched with displeasure when she saw the way that Elmer's eyes looked at Rose, full of love and hope. Chapter 5. Pennsylvania. For as much as Benjamin and Caroline have consented together in holy wedlock, and have witnessed the same before God and this company, and thereto have given and pledged their troth either to other, and have declared the same by giving and receiving of a ring, and by joining of hands, I pronounce that they be man and wife together, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. The pastor's words echoed around the church as the dust motes drifted in the ray of sunshine that slanted through the window. A few moments later, the pastor beamed at the small congregation and invited everyone to give thanks to the Lord and offer their best wishes to the happy couple for a long and loving marriage. Rose dabbed a handkerchief discreetly at her eyes to catch her tears and felt her heart lift at how beautiful the day had been. Her only regret was that Papa had been too frail to join them. He had pressed a locket into Caroline's hand earlier that morning, telling her that it had belonged to their mother, and he had saved it for this special occasion. And Caroline had gulped back her tears, not wanting to end up with red eyes for the ceremony. What a wonderful wedding, and I must say you look very lovely today, Rose. Benjamin's mother, Edith, smiled at Rose. That color of blue suits you very well, my dear. I'm sure you will have all the gentlemen wanting to dance with you this evening." Rose blushed, not expecting to receive a compliment on Caroline's wedding day. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Robertson, but I have to go home in a minute. Papa can't be left alone for long, and I promised him I would go back as soon as the ceremony was over." Caroline hurried over to them both, pulling Benjamin with her. "Are you leaving now, Rose? I don't want Papa to worry about where you've gotten to." "I was just telling your sister how lovely she looks," Edith Robertson said. "And you too, of course, Caroline. Your wedding gown is delightful." Caroline's face fell momentarily as she saw Benjamin looking at Rose with an encouraging smile. "Oh, that old thing," she muttered, gesturing at Rose. "That dress was one that I lent her, Edith. By her own admission, Rose doesn't have a fashionable bone in her body. So we decided I should help her choose, and we didn't want to waste money on a new gown, not with so many other things to consider." She shook her head slightly and gave Edith a wry smile. The dressmaker had quite the job taking it in, though. Rose has always had a figure more like a boy, but we did our best. "Well, I think it looks just right for her," Benjamin said, taking the sting out of Caroline's words. "You're both the most beautiful sisters in Pennsylvania today. That's for sure," he added diplomatically. "Don't wait up for me, Rose," Caroline continued. She tucked her hand into the crook of Benjamin's arm and pulled him close in a proprietorial manner. "We'll be dancing until the early hours, I expect. And Edith has said I can stay at their family home for a few days to recover from all the stress of organizing the wedding. You'll be fine looking after Papa, I'm sure." Before Rose could reply, Caroline had swept onward to talk to the wealthy friends of the Robertsons. "We had hoped to have the house at the edge of town ready for them to move into, but we didn't account for having dry rot in some of the beams. Hopefully it will be done in a month or two," Edith explained. "Caroline is very excited to live there," Rose replied. "She took me to have a look. It's a lovely house. And of course, as long as Caroline and Benjamin agree, you will always be very welcome to live there with them, my dear," Edith added. "I mean, if your father takes a turn for the worse, although we're all praying that he'll recover very soon." "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Robertson. I must admit I have been rather worried about running our house alone. It's not grand, but the bills mount up, and my job isn't that well paid." Rose caught herself and gave Edith a shy smile. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about my dilemmas, not on Benjamin's wedding day. I'm very grateful for your kind offer. But for now, I think Papa and I will be fine, although the house will feel mighty quiet without Caroline there." "Yes, she's a real force of nature, isn't she?" Edith commented, rather ambiguously. "I hope they'll be happy together," she added, almost to herself, as she watched Caroline making a beeline for their high society friends as Benjamin followed with a bemused look on his face. As Rose hurried home, her thoughts turned to Ezra. He was losing weight fast, disappearing before their eyes, and when she helped him get out of bed in the mornings, she could feel his bony frame under his nightclothes. "I think my time has almost come," he had muttered to her that morning, before calling Caroline into his room to give her the locket. "I've hung on to see my darling girl married, and now that I know she has someone to look after her, I can let the good Lord take me as he sees fit." "Nonsense, Papa. We're praying for you to pull through. Besides, I'm not ready to lose you yet. Who will I have to take care of without you?" Rose had given him a bright smile, but he had simply shaken his head. "I'm tired, Rose. I can't keep on like this for much longer." Before he could say more, his body had shivered as the start of a new fever crept stealthily through his body. When she got home from the wedding, Rose slipped into her sensible calico dress, hanging the blue silk one up with a pang of regret. She didn't own anything as lovely, and she had hoped that Caroline might let her keep it. Caroline had already purchased several new gowns in anticipation of all the socializing she would be doing as Benjamin's wife. But when Rose had tentatively asked her about keeping the blue dress, Caroline had laughed, as though the idea was ridiculous. "It's not as if you'll be going anywhere to merit such an expensive dress, Rose," she had said with a roll of her eyes. "It's me that's getting married, not you." A few moments later, Rose carried a tray of coffee and cake up the stairs. Ezra would want to hear all about the wedding, and she didn't have to return to work until the following day so they could spend a quiet afternoon together. Caroline looked beautiful, Papa. You would have been so proud of her. Rose nudged his bedroom door open with her foot, then almost dropped the tray at the sight which greeted her. Ezra was lying in a tangle of bedsheets, groaning with pain, and his complexion had an alarming gray tinge to it. He turned to see who had come into the room, but his eyes were glassy and unfocused. "Papa, what's happened?" Rose dumped the tray on the dressing table and ran to his side. "You didn't seem too bad this morning." Ezra clutched her hand in a rare display of affection toward his youngest daughter. "The Lord is calling me to his side, Rose. It's nothing to fear." His gaze traveled past her to the open doorway. "Is Caroline with you?" "No, Papa. It's her wedding today, remember? Shall I run and fetch her?" Rose stroked his hands, not knowing what to do for the best as Ezra's eyelids closed, looking almost translucent over his eyes. "No," he whispered. "I don't want to spoil her special day." He shuddered again as the fever coursed through his veins and his breath sounded thready in the quietness of the room. "We were so happy, just the three of us." His mouth curved in the faintest smile. "Tell Caroline I love her." His breathing slowed, and he opened his eyes a little, struggling to focus. "You must do what makes Caroline happy." The words were so faint, Rose could hardly hear them, and then Ezra's breath slowed even more until silence settled over the room. Rose bowed her head and wept, knowing that their papa had left his earthly body behind, and she was all alone in the world, save for her sister. Ezra's funeral was a small affair. He had lost touch with many of his business associates when he had stopped going out because of his ill health, but Rose was glad that the rain had cleared at the last moment, and the pastor had spoken kindly about him. "He was so dear to me, Benjamin. I was always his special girl, being the firstborn. I can't imagine life without him." Caroline blinked back her tears and sighed as they strolled back to the carriage awaiting them. "I'm sure it must be a wrench for both of you," Benjamin said, including Rose in his comment. Caroline sniffed dismissively. "I expect you'll soon get over it, Rose, what with being busy at work. You never had that special bond that Papa and I enjoyed." "Being busy does help keep my mind occupied, but the evenings are long and rather lonely without Papa to take care of," Rose said quietly. "Now that you've brought it up, I've been thinking. It makes no sense that you're rattling around in that house all on your own. Benjamin and I have agreed that it would be better if you came to live with us as soon as our new home is ready. It should only take a few more weeks." "If you're sure," Rose said, feeling brighter. "The company would be nice, and your mother did say I would be welcome," she added, smiling gratefully at Benjamin. "It's not Edith's decision to make," Caroline snapped. "I shall be mistress of the house, not Benjamin's mother. I can't be expected to take care of the more mundane matters of the household, not when I have so much to do, arranging our social calendar, Benjamin." She smiled adoringly at her husband until he nodded. "I have to ensure we're mixing with the right people, my sweet. It's important for our position in the community if you want to get ahead." She squeezed his arm, and they strolled on. "Maybe we should get a housekeeper if it comes to that," Benjamin replied. "I wouldn't expect Rose to work her fingers to the bone looking after us as if she's no better than a maid, not when she's already working all day at Sutton's. It wouldn't be right." "Rose doesn't mind," Caroline said airily with a tinkling laugh. "Do you?" she added, raising one eyebrow in her direction. "You'll have so much spare time you won't know what to do with yourself now that Papa's no longer with us, Lord rest his soul. I won't put upon you, of course, Rose, but I'm sure you'll want to help a little around the house in return for us taking such good care of you." With that, Caroline snapped open her fan and considered the matter closed. The following day, Rose was grateful to return to work and busy herself serving customers. The familiarity of weighing out the tea and coffee comforted her and helped calm her racing mind as she thought about her future. She had only ever lived in one house, and she would miss their neighbors once she was living with Caroline and Benjamin. "So tell me again, what sort of work does she expect you to do?" Betty asked during their lunch break. I thought you would be able to have a bit of time to yourself after doing everything for Caroline and your pa all these years. You did all the cooking and cleaning. Surely she can't expect you to carry on like that forever?" Her face clouded with indignation on Rose's behalf. "I don't mind," Rose said hastily, not wanting to give Betty the wrong impression. "Caroline's just finding her feet, and I'm sure she will be very busy with social gatherings. She's very supportive of helping Benjamin further his career. She tells me he's becoming a man of quite some importance in town, you know." "Is that what he wants?" Elmer asked, darting her a curious glance. "I thought you said he would be happier with something to do with the railroads?" Rose chuckled and took a bite of her apple. "I don't think that's quite respectable enough for Caroline. She has her heart set on being a lady of high society. Benjamin just agrees most of the time. That's the best way with Caroline. Her nerves don't take well to being disagreed with." Betty stood up and yawned. "I'm going to refill the jars of tea. It's been selling so fast, we're in danger of running out." Elmer nodded and watched her leave before turning back to Rose. He reached across the table and surreptitiously took her hand. "I know losing your pa has been difficult for you, and I'm just a tongue-tied fool who might get this wrong. But now that you're free to be your own woman, Rose, would you be my wife, like we talked about?" She felt the blood rush to her cheeks and nodded quickly. "I would like that very much, Elmer, and thank you for waiting. It was very thoughtful of you. We'll have to live at home with my mother for a while, but I don't like to think of you always being at Caroline's beck and call." He squeezed her hand, making Rose smile. "I'm not one for grand gestures, but I think we'll get along just fine, don't you? Besides, all that romance stuff is a bit silly in my opinion. It's the sort of thing Caroline would expect, but not someone sensible like you, Rose." He blinked nervously, waiting for her to agree. "I like the fact that you're sensible," he added. Rose had expected to feel euphoric at the thought of getting married to someone special, and tried to ignore the slight sense of disappointment at his words, squeezing his hand back. Elmer would take good care of her, she knew. The fact that her heart didn't skip a beat when she looked at him didn't really matter, she told herself. It was more important that they were friends already, and as he had said, they could live a companionable life together. You can't expect too much with your looks, and being a spinster is not such a bad thing as long as you have other interests in life. The words that Caroline had carelessly said to her a few weeks ago drifted through her mind again. She had told her in no uncertain terms that her duty lay with caring for Ezra. "But now I'm free of my obligations," Rose suddenly realized. She felt her spirits lift at how surprised Caroline would be that she was getting married, too. "And I think all that romance stuff is overrated as well," Rose said back to Elmer with a chuckle. "I'll tell Caroline this evening, and then we can make plans for our wedding." "Just something very modest, of course," Elmer said hastily. "I don't have money to throw away, like Benjamin's family," he added, with a slight hint of disapproval. As Rose returned to serving the customers for the afternoon, she marveled at how fast her life had changed. From worrying about being lonely after Ezra's passing, now she would have a husband of her own and a happy future to look forward to. "Would you have been pleased with Elmer's proposal, Papa?" The thought slid into her mind as Betty chattered on about it. The truth was, she would never know. She could only hope that he would have been happy for them and that Caroline would be too. Chapter 6. Pennsylvania. "This really is most inconvenient, Rose. I swear you're doing your utmost to upset me, just when it should be the happiest time of my life." Caroline's violet eyes blurred with tears, and her mouth quivered with emotion. "I thought you would have been happy for me," Rose replied quietly. The cake she had been eating suddenly felt like a mouthful of sawdust, and she put her fork down. "But it's so sudden," Caroline continued, waving Rose's words away. "I have so much to do to help Benjamin and get the house to my liking. Couldn't Elmer have waited? Why the rush?" "He said he wants to take care of me." "Are you sure that's his motivation?" "No sooner do I marry Benjamin than Elmer is following suit. He must have an ulterior motive, Rose. You're just too naive to see it." Caroline took a sip of water, getting control of herself again. "He must think you two can hang on to my coattails. Perhaps he thinks Benjamin will give him money. He knows they're a wealthy family, doesn't he? She demanded. Rose gasped at the implication. He's not like that at all, Caroline, she cried. We'll live with his mother until we can afford a little place of our own. Why can't you be happy for me? Rose broke off as Benjamin strolled into the dining room to join them. Are you all right, my love? He took one look at Caroline's face and hurried to her side. Elmer has proposed to Rose, Caroline said faintly, leaning against Benjamin's broad chest. Oh, well, congratulations, Rose. Benjamin shot her a smile, then looked at his wife with puzzlement. It's a cause for celebration, isn't it, my dear? Rose deserves to be happy, just as we are. You don't understand, Caroline sobbed, standing up and pushing him away. I need her at the house with me. I'm missing Papa, and there's so much for me to do. I think it's very selfish. Frankly, I can't believe you said yes to Elmer. If you cared a shred for me, you would have insisted he wait. She sobbed again and ran from the room, leaving Rose feeling wretched in her wake. I'm sorry, Rose. I don't know what's come over her lately. Benjamin gave her a sympathetic glance and poured himself a cup of coffee. Why don't you tell me a bit more about things, and I'll see if I can talk to Caroline. He sat down and nodded for her to start. That's very kind of you. She looked at his warm brown eyes and saw only encouragement in them, unlike Caroline's, which had been filled with resentment and anger. Taking a deep breath, she explained that Elmer had proposed to her several weeks ago, but that she had waited a little while to share her good news, not wanting to steal any of the limelight from Caroline. Benjamin listened carefully, his expression hard to read. And are you in love with Elmer? He asked when Rose had finished. Rose flushed, surprised at his question. She had expected him to ask about how they would pay for the wedding, not about love. Well, I were very companionable when we worked together, she stuttered. Elmer thinks that declarations of love are unnecessary, a bit ostentatious even. Benjamin raised one eyebrow. Do you agree? He asked, leaning forward slightly. Rose paused for a moment, feeling slightly flustered under his direct gaze. I'm sure he will take good care of me, she said eventually. She twisted her hands in her lap. Just before he died, Papa said I must put my duty to family first. She sighed as she remembered how he had gripped her hand, waiting for her to agree that she would. I'm sure Caroline doesn't mean to stop you from being married, Benjamin said gently. Now that I've gotten to know her a bit better, I've realized she finds it quite difficult to put other people's feelings ahead of her own. He sipped his coffee again, lost in thought. She's not selfish, Rose said, not wanting Benjamin to think badly of her sister. They shared a look of mutual understanding across the table. Of course not, and I admire your loyalty to her, Benjamin said quickly. I just meant, perhaps give it a little time, and she'll be more pleased for you. And I'm sorry if my question was intrusive. I just want to make sure that Elmer's right for you. I mean, we both do, I'm sure. I'd hate for you to marry for the wrong reasons, like being lonely after losing your father. Rose's heart beat a little faster as Benjamin's expression softened with concern. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. She gathered her shawl and tied it over her shoulders. I'll tell Elmer that we should leave it a couple of months before our wedding. I expect you and Caroline will be so busy with a social whirl of events by then that she won't mind so much. Benjamin pulled a face and then laughed as he caught her eye. I can't stand all that hobnobbing with people in the hopes of climbing up the social ladder, he confided with a grin. Don't tell Caroline, though, or she'll be even more determined to make me go to them. As soon as Rose told Caroline of her plan to delay the wedding, Caroline cheered up and pressed on with organizing all the carpenters who were renovating their house. Scarcely a day went by without a carriage pulling up outside the Robertsons' family home, with one of Caroline's new high society friends coming to recommend the best wallpaper or drapes or where the finest furniture could be sourced. Look at this, isn't it delightful? Several weeks had passed, and Caroline thrust a swatch of fabric under Rose's nose as they sat in the parlor one Sunday evening. Rose fingered the sumptuous deep red brocade and nodded before resuming mending the small tear in her work dress. It's the most expensive one they had in the store, but Isabel Smythe said it looks lovely in their country house. Caroline sighed happily, and flicked through the handful of thick vellum invitations that lay on her lap. "We've been invited to so many parties. I don't know how we'll keep up with them all," she said with a tinkle of laughter. "You've certainly made an impression on everyone, Caroline," Rose said generously. "I don't know how you manage it. Don't you ever feel shy?" Caroline leaned back into the wingback armchair and shook her head. "Quite the opposite, Rose. I feel as though I was born for this kind of life. It's just taken me over 20 years to get here." She fanned herself with the invitations. "This heat is taking it out of me, though, I must say. I've been feeling very tired for the last few days. I would suggest that Benjamin could take me away for a few days to rest. But I daren't miss any of the parties I've said yes to. It only takes a few people gossiping to fall out of favor." Rose continued with her sewing quietly, while Caroline closed her eyes and dozed for a moment. She couldn't imagine having friendships that were so shallow you might be forgotten about in the blink of an eye. Betty and Elmer might be classed as poor, but at least they knew the value of real friendship. As Rose came to the end of her mending, she heard footsteps approaching in the hallway and was pleased to see that it was Benjamin. Although his parents had been very welcoming to Rose, she still found it hard to relax, knowing that she was their guest. "Are you okay, my love? Ma said she thought you'd been overdoing it, and you do look a bit pale." He perched on the arm of Caroline's chair and took her hand in his own as she yawned. "Never better," Caroline replied quickly. "I'm glad you're here because I need to ask you about our new dining room table. I can't stop thinking about that lovely inlaid walnut table I saw at the Smythes. I know it will be expensive to buy one the same, but it will look so much nicer than that old mahogany one your mother offered us." She looked up at Benjamin through her eyelashes and smiled. "You did tell me I could choose what I liked, sweetheart." Benjamin hesitated for a moment, and Caroline pouted. "It's for your own good, dear. We have to maintain standards, and we don't want all the other wives gossiping about us having a house full of hand-me-downs, do we?" Benjamin patted her hand and then stood in front of the window, looking out across the rooftops of the town that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Actually, I've got some news, Caroline." He cleared his throat, and Rose wondered why he sounded nervous. "Well, go on then. Don't keep us in suspense." Caroline sighed, irritated with him for not agreeing to the table immediately. "Pa has been in talks with his business partner. Pa's not getting any younger, as you know." He poured himself a glass of lemonade and gulped some down. "He's decided to sell his share of the business because he knows I don't want to take it on." Caroline frowned. "What will you do instead, then? Will you become a gentleman of leisure?" Her face brightened slightly at the thought, as she imagined long trips to Europe to visit all the places she had only ever read about. "Give up work? Never. I'd be bored out of my mind," Benjamin replied hastily with a chuckle. "And the business isn't worth that much anyway. No, I've got some exciting news for us, my dear. I've been accepted to work for the railroad company in a place called Blossom Creek." "What?" Caroline sat up straighter, and her mouth gaped open. "I've never heard of the place. It sounds horribly rustic, though." She shuddered slightly. "It's a frontier town out west in Montana, my love," Benjamin explained. "It will be a wonderful adventure for us, and a chance for us to make a new life away from all the pretentiousness that I hate so much here on the coast. But I like it here. This is the only place I've ever known, and I'm just starting to make so many new friends. I've worked so hard to help your career." Caroline's words petered out as she digested Benjamin's words. "Blossom Creek sounds awful," she suddenly wailed. "We won't know anyone. Black, I might as well be a complete nobody. We'll make new friends, I'm sure." Tears started rolling down her cheeks, and she looked wildly at Rose for support. "Tell him, Rose. Don't just sit there. We can't possibly go to live in Montana." Rose darted a nervous look between Caroline and Benjamin, not wanting to inflame the situation. "It might be nice," she murmured. "I served a customer recently who was going to Montana, and she said the people are very friendly. I'm sure you'll make new friends in no time, Caroline. You know how good you are at entertaining." She gave her sister an encouraging smile. "We'll stay in touch by letter. You can write and tell me all about it." "Rose is right," Benjamin chimed in, cheered by the sensible answer. There are always new people arriving at a town like Blossom Creek. I hear it's growing very fast. We'll soon find a new social circle, and the job comes with a nice little house. There are mountains nearby, and before Benjamin could utter another word, Caroline jumped up. 2 bright spots of color stained her cheeks, and her mouth was pinched in a hard line of fury. I don't care for Blossom Creek one bit, Benjamin. I can't believe you've agreed to take some lowly railroad job in a dull backwater stuck out in the middle of nowhere. She folded her arms and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. It's not like that, Caroline. If you give it a chance, you'll find out. I can see I have no choice in the matter, she snapped. Her eyes narrowed as a sudden thought occurred to her. Will I have to set up this little house from scratch? Will I have a housekeeper? A maid? And what about a cook? Benjamin looked confused for a moment. It will only be the 2 of us, my dear. I'm sure you can manage to keep house for us, can't you? You used to do it so well for Ezra. Oh, don't be such a fool, Benjamin. How many times do I have to tell you that Rose is better at all those tedious details than I am? She glared at Benjamin and tapped her foot. I'm not sure my income will stretch to what you're expecting, Benjamin said. His expression was flat with disappointment. Never mind, Caroline suddenly said in a mercurial change of mood. She turned to Rose and gave her a warm smile. You'll come with us, won't you, Rose? You promised Papa you would put family duty before all else, and if ever there was a time for you to help me, this is it. But what about Elmer and my wedding? He likes his job at Sutton's, and he has his mother to take care of. Rose felt a shiver of anxiety down her back at how quickly everything was changing. He never really cared for you, Rose, Caroline said firmly. She hurried over and knelt next to her, looking up at her with tears in her eyes again. I can't bear the thought of us being so far away from you, Rose. You're the only family I have left, and what I have never told you is that Papa made me promise we would always look out for each other. I know, but I'll be married to Elmer. She wondered why her sister couldn't see the plain facts. Caroline pulled her into a sudden hug. I never wanted to say this before, Rose, but I've thought for a while that Elmer isn't right for you. He's so timid, and let's face it, he's never really said that he loves you, has he? Rose hesitated, then shook her head slightly. Her mind felt so confused by the torrent of Caroline's emotions that she could hardly think straight. But you and Benjamin have a life of your own, she stuttered. I'd just be in the way if I came with you. Nonsense, Rose. It will be perfect. Benjamin will be busy with his new job, and you and I can get settled into this new town together. She gave her an imploring smile. You can't let me face this all alone, Rose. You know it won't be good for my nerves. I can only agree to the move if you come with us. She looked between Benjamin and Rose and pouted again, before breaking into a smile. You see, I knew you would both come around to my way of thinking. The 3 of us will go to Blossom Creek. And don't worry, Rose. Once I get to know everyone there, I'll make sure to introduce you to all the suitable men. You'll soon forget all about Elmer, and we'll find you a lovely new husband out west instead. Chapter 7. Blossom Creek, Montana. Rose looked at the view through the carriage window and felt a shiver of excitement, in spite of the lingering sense of homesickness that still ached in her heart. Her last couple of weeks in Pennsylvania had passed in a whirlwind of helping Caroline get ready for their move out west and packing up the last few bits in their old family home after Ezra's passing. Edith had promised she would take care of the sale of the house for them and forward Caroline the modest amount of money it would make as soon as she could. When Rose had explained her decision to Elmer, she had done her best to break it to him gently. I promised Papa on his deathbed that I would help Caroline if she needed me. She had blinked back her tears before continuing. Perhaps I could return here once Caroline is settled? The suggestion was tentative, but they both knew it would never happen. Elmer had shrugged, not seeming to be as disappointed as Rose had expected him to be. It's probably for the best, he had muttered. I offered to marry you so you wouldn't be left alone, but I've been worried that might not have been a good enough reason, he had finally confessed, looking a bit sheepish. Rose had felt her guilt lift slightly because, truth be told, she had been wondering the same thing. I know you think declarations of love are fanciful, Elmer, but I do hope you fall head over heels in love with someone one day, and I hope I do as well. Elmer had grinned at her. We'll still be friends, though, won't we? Betty and I want to know all your news, so make sure you write to us. Betty and Elmer had bought Rose a new shawl, and Abe Sutton had let them slip away from work for an hour to wave her off at the station. At the last minute, Betty had run down the platform and given Rose a hug with tears in her eyes. "Promise you won't forget us, Rose," she had said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Never," Rose had declared. "I'll write you just as soon as I can." She had looked at her two best friends in the world, and she smiled as a sudden thought occurred to her. "Elmer is a kind man, Betty. If he asks you to walk with him after work, or to meet his ma, I think that would be a very good idea." Betty had looked at her bashfully with dawning understanding. "Are you sure? You wouldn't mind? I do like him much more than the boys from my street who keep asking to walk out with me." "Nothing would make me happier," Rose had said before Caroline had interrupted, telling them they had to board the train immediately or risk being left behind. The last thing Rose saw as the train pulled out of the station was Elmer and Betty linking arms and waving goodbye. Wreathed in the billowing steam from the locomotive engine, and it had given her a crumb of comfort that at least perhaps they might end up happily married, even if she didn't. "Rose? Rose? Are you listening to me?" Caroline's querulous voice brought Rose back to the present. "I'm not feeling well, and I need some water. Could you go and ask the conductor how soon we'll be stopping?" Rose nodded and stood up gently, not wanting to wake Benjamin, who was snatching some sleep. The carriage felt hot and stuffy, and Caroline was pale with dark circles under her eyes. She had been complaining loudly for most of the journey that travel did not suit her, and Rose felt a pang of pity at how listless she seemed. Rose walked along the carriage, grabbing onto the edge of the seats to steady herself. Benjamin had purchased first-class tickets for them, which was a small blessing, she realized as she saw the hard wooden seats further down the carriage for those who could only afford cheaper tickets. She dreaded to think how Caroline would have coped with those. "Can I help you, ma'am?" The conductor was hurrying toward her. "You can't just stand about like this. You're in my way, and it's not safe." As if to underline his point, the carriage suddenly lurched, sending Rose tumbling into the nearest seat, which luckily was empty. "I just wanted to know how long it is until the next stop." The conductor peered through the window to look at the view, gauging where they were. "About an hour, provided we don't have any mishaps." He pulled his pocket watch out and tutted when he saw the time, before hurrying onward. Just as Rose was about to stand up again, she caught sight of a folded paper sticking out from between the seats. Curious, she pulled it out and unfolded it. The Matrimonial Times. The headline grabbed her attention immediately, and she blushed slightly. A woman in the seat on the opposite side of the aisle caught her eye and smiled. "You can have it." The other lady left it behind when she got off at the last town we stopped at. She leaned closer. She was coming out west to get married. "I am, too." She tapped Rose's bare ring finger and grinned. "I see you aren't married either. You should have a look at the advertisements in the paper there and see if any of them take your fancy." "Oh, I'm traveling west to help my sister settle in. Her husband has a new job at Blossom Creek. I don't think I'll have time to think about marriage." The woman pursed her lips. "A pretty woman like you? What a terrible shame. I'm sure your sister wouldn't want you to remain a spinster all your life, not when there are so many lonely gentlemen looking for a wife." She winked at Rose with a mischievous smile. "Take the paper anyway. There's no need to tell your sister, is there? There's a shortage of suitable ladies living out west for the gents to marry. Besides, looking never harmed anyone, did it?" Rose nodded awkwardly and tucked the paper in her dress pocket, thinking it would be rude not to, after the woman had been so insistent. As she edged her way back up the carriage to her seat, she thought about the conversation they had just had. "Perhaps this could be a way for me to find love," she mused. Her initial glance at the advertisements piqued her curiosity. Far from being no-hopers, the gentlemen seemed to be ranchers or hard-working men who had moved west for a new job. just like Benjamin was. Feeling a surge of optimism, she decided that she would take a better look once they reached Blossom Creek and consider applying through one of the matrimonial agencies. Caroline wouldn't need her help forever, and for the first time, Rose was starting to think that she could take matters into her own hands. She didn't need to wait for Caroline's approval, or even for her to decide whom she could marry. This is the most uncomfortable I've been in my whole life. Many months had passed, and the journey out to Blossom Creek was a distant memory. Caroline shifted crossly in the wingback armchair next to the fire, glaring resentfully at the way her dress ballooned over her distended belly. "Let me get you another cup of tea," Rose said, jumping up. "It's not for much longer. And then think how wonderful it will be to have your baby in your arms soon." Her face softened as she imagined the weight of a newborn baby in her own arms and the curl of tiny fingers against her chest. "What if I never get my figure back?" Caroline wailed. "Bring me some more cake with that tea, will you? I feel ravenous all the time. I'll be glad when this wretched pregnancy is over and done with." Rose hurried off to the kitchen and busied herself with getting what Caroline needed. As she waited for the water to boil, she watched the birds hopping on the snow outside on their veranda, searching for crumbs. She smiled as two of them squabbled over a tasty morsel before throwing the crumbs from the bottom of the cake tin out for them. She poured the water over the tea leaves and waited for them to steep, enjoying the quietness of the kitchen without Caroline's grumbling. Her mind drifted back to the evening before. "I didn't think it would be this hard for her," Benjamin had confided in a worried tone after Caroline had gone to bed early. "I know her nerves can be bad, but I thought the baby's imminent arrival would make her feel more settled at Blossom Creek." Rose had poured him a coffee before resuming the washing up. "I don't know much about motherhood, so I can't really comment." Emma, from the Ponderosa, said that she was so excited to meet her baby that she didn't mind feeling tired toward the end. But I suppose every woman is different. Emma sounds more like what I thought being a mother would be. He had sipped his coffee. "I hope they're treating you well at work, Rose. I know Caroline asks a lot of you around the house. It's not something I agree with, to be honest." Rose had brushed off his concerns. "It's fine, Benjamin, truly. Emma is lovely, and I don't mind doing what I can here. Caroline has never been one for doing household chores, and I'm used to juggling a job with what Caroline needs as well. It's what I've always done." Caroline had agreed that Rose could go out to work in the mornings, as long as she didn't neglect her duties at home, and Rose had been working as a maid at the Ponderosa guest house for the last 5 months, which she loved. Emma and Jared, the owners, felt like family to her, and she was very grateful she had spotted the sign in their window, looking for help with their flourishing business. But lately, Caroline had been growing ever more demanding. Rose poured out 2 cups of tea and put them on a tray with some cake, taking them back to the small parlor. She passed a cup to Caroline and sat on the edge of her chair, not knowing whether to share what was on her mind or not. "I know that look," Caroline said, staring at her over her cup. "Spit it out. What's bothering you?" Rose looked into the fire before taking a deep breath. "We've been in Blossom Creek for 8 months now, and when we left to come here, you said you might help me find a husband." She darted a look at Caroline, noticing that her expression had darkened. "The thing is, Emma mentioned that she knows the owner of one of the matrimonial agencies here in Blossom Creek. It's called the Happy Hearts Matrimonial Agency. She said she would introduce Eleanor to me. When the time is right, of course," she added hastily. "I don't know why you're in such a rush to marry," Caroline replied with a weary sigh. "I know you might not like the idea of me using an agency, but a lady I spoke to on our train journey out here said it's quite usual in these parts to use them. Some ladies even reply to advertisements from the East Coast and meet their future husbands through correspondence." Caroline pulled a face. How dreadfully crass. Being a wife is nothing but one demanding chore after another, from what I've found. She gave her sister a critical look. "It's not as if you'll end up in a good marriage anyway. I know you might think me harsh, but there's no point beating about the bush. Compared to me, you're no beauty, Rose. It's just a fact of life." "I know, Caroline. You've been telling me so much my whole life. She lifted her chin, feeling suddenly rebellious. It doesn't mean I don't deserve to marry a kind man, though. Benjamin is kind to you, except you're too bad-tempered to notice it most of the time. How dare you say such a wicked thing, Caroline spluttered. Really, Rose? You've become quite intolerable since you started working for Emma Barton. If I think she's putting ideas above your station into her head, I shall have to insist you stop working there. It's just a common guest house, after all, Rose gasped. She didn't think she could bear being cooped up with Caroline all day. She's not like that, Caroline, she said, trying to pacify her. She always asks after you, and I'm not meant to say anything, but she's knitting you a lovely shawl and bonnet for the baby. I just meant that when you don't need my help any longer, I could see if the Happy Hearts matrimonial agency might be able to help me find a husband. She was relieved to see that Caroline was looking happier. It's not as if you'll want me under your feet forever. You and Benjamin will want your own family home without having to think of me. Well, I suppose I might consider letting you use them, maybe next year, Caroline said grudgingly. I'll need all the help I can get when the baby arrives, and there's no point in me looking for someone else when I have you, is there? She stroked her stomach and closed her eyes briefly. I still don't know why you'd bother, she added quietly, almost to herself. Marriage has turned out to be rather disappointing. Her mouth pinched in a sour expression as she heard Benjamin arriving home from work, and she turned her head away from him as he came in to ask how she was feeling. Would you like me to serve dinner soon? Rose jumped up, wondering if she should give Caroline and Benjamin some privacy. Thank you. That would be lovely. Benjamin shot her a grateful smile, but Rose could see that Caroline's brush-off had hurt his feelings. I'll sit with Caroline and tell her about my day. He stroked his wife's shoulder, but Caroline just shrugged his hand away. As soon as this baby arrives and the weather improves, I shall have to start meeting up with people again, Benjamin. It's driving me mad sitting indoors day after day. She sniffed slightly. I hope I can find some more interesting people than the ones you've introduced me to so far. Everyone seems rather dull here in Blossom Creek. She sighed again. Can't we go back to Pennsylvania, Benjamin? She lifted his hand and kissed it, fluttering her eyelashes. It would make me so happy. I'm sure that's more important to you than this silly obsession with working for the railroad company. Rose tidied the cups and plates onto the tray and hurried away to the kitchen, but not before she saw Benjamin's expression fall. It's all I've ever wanted, Caroline. Once you've had the baby, you'll feel more at home, I'm sure. Our neighbors are kind and friendly. What does it matter if they're not wealthy socialites? Benjamin's words became fainter as Rose unloaded the tray. Misty stretched in front of the range and purred loudly as Rose picked her up and stroked her silky fur. Why can't she be happy? Rose murmured. I only hope I meet someone as nice as Benjamin one day, she whispered, trying to imagine her future husband. The cat looked at her with impassive green eyes, and Rose shivered with a sense of unease. No matter what she and Benjamin did to try and make Caroline's life easier, it never seemed to be enough, and she wondered what might happen if Caroline grew bored of her new life out west. Chapter 8. Rose turned her face to the sun as she hurried along the street to the Ponderosa. The buds had burst open on the trees in the park, and she could see the pink and white blossoms dancing in the gentle breeze against the acid green leaves of late spring. Good morning, Rose. A mighty fine day we're having. The clerk lifted his hat and nodded to Rose as they passed. Hello, Mr. Dintner. I hope your wife is feeling better now. The clerk grinned at Rose and nodded, saying he would pass along her best wishes. Rose stifled a yawn and smiled to herself, in spite of how weary she felt. They had been in Blossom Creek for many months now, and although she still missed Betty and Elmer, she was glad to call this place home. There was something about the fast-growing rural town and the people who lived here that made her feel welcome, as though they weren't as worried about the social conventions they had left behind. Every time she went out, she would see a friendly face, and Emma had introduced her to as many people as she could to help her fit in. If only Caroline could see it the same way. Rose didn't want to think unkind thoughts, but it seemed that Caroline was determined not to like Blossom Creek, and Rose couldn't understand why she was being so stubborn. Baby Jonah was almost 10 weeks old now, and there had been a steady stream of visitors to come and congratulate Caroline and Benjamin, usually accompanied by gifts of food for the family or exquisitely made clothes for him. "Everyone is so generous," Rose had said as she waved goodbye to Ethel Selby, the wife of one of Benjamin's colleagues from the railroad company, the afternoon before. "Nosy, more like," Caroline had snapped irritably. "I wouldn't mind if all these visitors were important folk in the town, but instead I have to suffer every inquisitive woman from the neighborhood poking their noses in." "I think that's a bit unfair," Rose had shot back. "They're trying to make you feel welcome, is all. We're lucky they're taking an interest. They all speak very highly of Benjamin. Ethel just said Benjamin might take over Morris Selby's managerial position at the railroad when he retires." Caroline had harumphed and continued brushing her hair, looking at herself this way and that in the mirror. "Why you think I'd be interested in Benjamin's work is beyond me, Rose. It bores me to tears. What I'm more pleased about is that I've gotten my figure back," she had added, smoothing her hands down the new silk gown she had insisted Benjamin let her have made at the dressmaker's. "This color suits me, don't you think?" Before Rose had been able to reply, Jonah had started whimpering, waving a pudgy fist in the air from his crib. "You'll have to see to him, Rose. I'm exhausted." Caroline had peered into the crib, not lifting Jonah out. "In fact, I think it would be better if he were with you in your room during the night from now on. I can hardly think straight with all his fussing, and you know how I need my sleep." She had hurried out of the room, not waiting for her answer, and Rose had picked Jonah up, snuggling his downy head under her chin and rocking him gently back to sleep. "Are you okay, Rose? You look like you need a cup of tea." Emma bustled out of the front door of the guest house, almost knocking her over and snapping her out of her troubled thoughts about Caroline. "Oh yes, I'm fine," Rose said hastily. "Jonah had me up a few times in the night, but I don't mind. He's so adorable." Emma looked puzzled. "Why doesn't Caroline take care of him? She can't expect you to do everything." She tightened her shawl over her shoulders and brightened as she saw Jared pulling their wagon to a halt on the road out front. "I think she's finding it difficult," Rose said quietly. "Benjamin does his best, but Jonah wants his mama, of course." Emma gave her a shrewd look. "Some women find the first baby hard, but from what I know of Caroline, it seems more like she doesn't enjoy being tied down in any way." Rose nodded reluctantly, not wanting to speak out of turn. Caroline was looking forward to all the socializing she and Benjamin would do in Pennsylvania. "She's such a social butterfly and so good at it, you know, not like me," she said with a wry smile. "I think she's found it hard adapting to a quieter life here in Blossom Creek. It's not what she imagined when they got married." "Well, I know baby Jonah will feel loved with you looking after him," Emma said, patting her on her shoulder. "Just don't forget, you're entitled to your own life as well." Rose gave a small shrug and started tying her apron. "Actually, that reminds me," Emma said suddenly. "Eleanor and her sister, Susan from the Happy Hearts Matrimonial Agency, are coming round for tea later today. I think it's high time you spoke to them about whether they could find you a lovely husband of your own." "Oh no, I couldn't possibly leave Caroline now. She needs me more than ever. Who would take care of Jonah if I wasn't there?" Emma hurried away to get into the wagon, where Jared was waiting patiently for her. Rose's words had confirmed her worst suspicions. It seemed that Caroline was scarcely taking any interest in her baby at all. She knew with a heavy heart that Caroline had no intention of ever letting Rose get married to anyone, because it would mean she would lose the person who did all the chores she couldn't be bothered with, even, it now seemed, raising baby Jonah. "Look at what I'm making, Jonah." Rose cradled Jonah in one arm and smiled down into his dark eyes as she stirred the stew on the stove later that day. He gave her a gummy smile, and her heart melted. "You're such an innocent little one," she said softly, looking at the soft curve of his cheek. His eyelids drooped as he drifted off to sleep again, and Rose laid him carefully back in his little crib in the corner of the kitchen so she could carry on cooking. As she stood up again, She felt the piece of paper in her pocket rustle. She peered out into the hallway, but Caroline was dozing in the parlor, and Rose knew she wouldn't bother her in the kitchen. She pulled the paper out and unfolded it, skimming the words again. A gentleman of private means, seeking a wife. Arthur Miller is a businessman of private means who will shortly be coming to live at Blossom Creek. He is seeking a God-fearing wife who will happily accommodate times when he has to travel away for business. He has never been married and promises to only correspond with one lady. He values integrity and an adventurous nature over vanity and looks, and in return will provide a secure and happy home for his new wife, with the chance to travel with him in the future if she wishes. Rose felt her heart beat faster as she reread the words, a secure and happy home. That was what she wanted, and with someone who might want her more for her character than for how she looked. She caught sight of the unruly curls that framed her face, reflected in the shine of the pan, and patted them back into place. The echo of all the times Caroline had told her she wasn't pretty enough to marry filled her with self-doubt again for a moment. But then she remembered what Eleanor had said to her earlier that day. Most of the men who come to us are far more concerned about finding a bride who will fit in with life out here than just how they look. She had taken a sip of her tea, then leaned forward and patted Rose's knee. Besides, whoever has been filling your head with the idea that you're not pretty is completely misguided. You have a wholesome look about you, Rose, and we can see your kindness in your eyes. Susan Lewis, Eleanor's sister, had nodded her agreement. Eleanor's right, you know. The good Lord sees the beauty within us, and I know he will bless you with the right husband, with a little bit of guidance from us too, of course. She added with a chuckle that made her eyes twinkle. Just take this advertisement with you and think about it. I know you feel as though you're not ready to start courting, but there's no reason why you can't start a correspondence with Arthur. He seems like a very pleasant gentleman from what he's told us about himself so far. Rose had tucked the copy of the advertisement into her pocket, blushing furiously. I'll think about it, she said, serving them some more cake. Now, as she listened to Jonah's rhythmic breathing and folded the advertisement back into her pocket, she decided that Susan had a point. She could write to Arthur, and by the time he arrived in Blossom Creek, she would have a better idea of what he was like. But more to the point, Jonah would be old enough not to leave Caroline so exhausted. Perhaps if she moved out, Caroline would take more interest in him too. Maybe I'm making it too easy for Caroline. If I weren't here, she would have to take care of Jonah, and surely she wouldn't be able to resist finding him completely adorable. The thought took Rose by surprise, but as the idea took shape in her mind, she realized it would probably be for the best. Rose lifted her chin, full of determination, and decided that it was time to take matters into her own hands. Caroline might not like her getting married and moving out to start with, but they would still be in the same town. Rose would be able to support Caroline, but give her the space she needed to start taking on more responsibility for her own home and family, which would surely help her to bond better with Jonah and create a stronger marriage with Benjamin, she told herself. Suddenly, the peace of the evening was shattered by the sound of hammering on the front door. Caroline, open up! The shout was high-pitched with panic. Caroline, I have to see you. The fist pounded against the door again, and Rose ran to open the door as Jonah woke with a start and the air filled with his startled cries. What is it? What's the matter? Caroline pushed past Rose to see what was happening. Why are you disturbing us like this, Ethel? Has something happened? Ethel Selby stood on their veranda, ashen-faced. There's been a terrible accident at work. Her chin trembled, and Rose put a hand on her arm to steady her. There was a small explosion in one of the sheds. Benjamin ran into the fire to rescue Morris. He was so brave. Morris could have been killed. Come in and sit down, Ethel. You're in shock. Rose helped Ethel into the house and steered her to the parlor, where she sank into a chair. The doctor came, and thankfully, Morris will be all right. It's just a bit of damage to his lungs, he thinks. But Benjamin got caught in the flames. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at Caroline. He's been quite badly burnt, Caroline. The doctor is treating him at our house right now. I came as quickly as I could." Caroline clutched at her throat and stumbled backward into the nearest chair. "Will he live? Where are the burns?" Her violet eyes were dark with the horror of it, and she looked at Rose for comfort with panic etched on her face. Ethel gave Caroline a shaky smile. "Thank the Lord, yes. The doctor says Benjamin was very lucky. He will be fine, apart from some scarring, of course." She touched the side of her head with a trembling hand. "The flames caught his arm and face, but he hasn't lost his sight, Caroline. Praise the Lord, he will recover and be fine. What with you just having had Jonah, your little family is safe." "You must go to him," Rose cried. She had plucked Jonah from his crib and crooned, stroking his silky curls to soothe his crying. "Yes, come back with me now," Ethel said, standing up again. "We've made him comfortable, but he keeps asking for you." Caroline blanched and pressed her hand to her mouth. "I can't see Benjamin like that. His handsome face will be ruined." A sob escaped from her mouth. "My nerves just wouldn't take it. I don't want to see him looking burnt. I want to remember him as he used to be." Rose looked at Caroline aghast. "He needs you, Caroline. You have to see him. He got injured from saving someone's life. Doesn't that mean something to you?" "Don't make me," Caroline cried. "Take Jonah instead," she implored Rose. "Tell Benjamin I'm getting things ready for him at home. Just don't make me see him like this. You know I'm no good with this sort of thing, Rose. Please?" Rose nodded and reached for a shawl to wrap Jonah up. "I'll give him your love," she said stiffly. Yes, of course," Caroline said hastily. "Tell him I love him, and I'll take care of him once he gets home." Chapter 9. Rose tiptoed into the bedroom and carefully pulled the drapes back to let the dappled sunlight in. "It's okay. You don't need to be quiet. I'm awake." Benjamin's deep voice held a hint of humor. "The scars have gotten to the itchy stage now, but I didn't want to wake Caroline by getting up early. I'm still not very steady on those yet." He glanced at the 2 walking canes propped up against his dresser and rolled his eyes. "You're making remarkable progress, though," Rose said gently. "The doctor said it might take a year until you could walk again and use your arm properly. It's only been a few months, and look how far you've come." She poured some warm water from a pitcher into the bowl on his washstand and soaked a cloth in it. "Would you like me to bathe your arm now, or shall I come back in a while?" Benjamin winced as he shrugged his nightshirt off. "I don't want to inconvenience you, Rose. I feel as though I should be able to do this myself by now." "It's no bother at all," Rose said hastily, interrupting him. "I've told you, we're just grateful it wasn't worse. I used to nurse Papa, so this comes naturally to me anyway." She carefully peeled the bandages off his arm and cleaned the remnants of his burns with the lightest of touches. Benjamin looked at the gleam of her golden curls as she bent over his arm and felt a rush of gratitude for Rose's selfless nature. "This is one of my favorite times of the day," he murmured. "Yes, it always lifts my heart to see the sunshine coming over the top of the mountains," Rose replied, frowning slightly with concentration. "I meant having your company," Benjamin said. His warm voice made Rose's heart skip a beat, and she hoped he wouldn't notice the blush that had crept up her cheeks. "I'll bring Jonah to see you as soon as I've rebandaged your arm. He gets so excited when I'm walking toward your bedroom. He's as bright as a button. He knows exactly where we're going." How is Caroline?" Rose could hear the hesitation in Benjamin's tone. "I know how hard this has been for her," he finished in a rush, and his words bumped with Rose's as they spoke at the same time. "She'll come round soon, I'm sure," Rose said, trying to sound brighter than she felt. She turned to rinse the cloth out again, not wanting Benjamin to see the lie on her face. In the 3 months since Benjamin's accident, Caroline had barely been into his bedroom more than a handful of times. To start with, she had said she found it too distressing to see the weeping red burns that had ravaged his good looks. But now that his skin was starting to heal, leaving silvery scars on the side of his face, she told them both that Rose was far better at nursing him than she would be. She had said quite firmly that her time would be better spent getting to know more people in Blossom Creek. So once Benjamin was up and about again, they wouldn't have forgotten all about the Robertson family. "Will you read to me for a few minutes, Rose? I find it very comforting when I've had a bad night. Only if you have time, of course." I feel selfish asking you." Rose smiled and picked up the copy of Moby Dick that Emma had given her. "It's no bother. Besides, I get as much pleasure from reading out loud as you do from listening," she said with a grin. "Let's see how far we get until Jonah wakes up." She sat in the chair next to the window and started reading as Benjamin closed his eyes and leaned back against his pillows with a happy sigh, letting Rose's melodic voice wash over him. As the sunlight crept across the wooden floor, Benjamin opened his eyes a crack and took the opportunity to study Rose. Her kind hazel eyes and open expression were so different from Caroline's that they hardly looked like sisters. His face darkened as he thought about his marriage. He knew that Caroline was unhappy, but no matter what he suggested, she was determined not to listen. "Even returning to Pennsylvania holds no draw for me any longer," she had declared in a fit of temper the night before as they had sat eating dinner. "I feel as though I've been deceived in this marriage," she cried. "You promised me a life of comfort and elegance back east, where I would have been someone who mattered. And now? Now we're stuck in this backwater, full of ranchers and uncouth people of no social standing, and all everyone ever asks me about is you, Benjamin. It's as if I've become invisible." "What sort of life is this that you've condemned me to?" she had shouted, throwing her napkin down and bursting into tears before running from the room. Rose had gasped at the cruelty of Caroline's words, seeing the hurt fill Benjamin's eyes. But for the first time, she had also seen something else in his face. A weary resignation that nothing he did would ever be good enough for his wife. The following day, Rose tried to tempt Caroline into a better mood. "Why don't you come for a walk in the park with me and Jonah? It's a lovely day. We can take a picnic and a rug. It will be like when we used to go with Papa when we were children." She scooped a spoonful of stewed fruit into Jonah's mouth, and he giggled with excitement. "Mama, Mama!" Jonah lifted his arms, looking between Rose and Caroline. "Oh, look, he's asking you for a cuddle." Rose smiled indulgently, but Caroline eyed his sticky hands with distaste and stepped backward out of his reach. "I can feel one of my migraines coming on," Caroline said with a long sigh. She pressed her hand to her forehead and sighed again. "You go without me. I expect I just need a lie down, and then I'll feel better. This weather is so oppressive I can hardly breathe." Rose nodded, feeling a pang of disappointment. She was looking forward to enjoying a rare afternoon off, taking Jonah for a little outing, but she felt sad that Caroline had become more distant than ever in recent weeks. She seemed preoccupied with something, but when Rose had asked her if something was bothering her, Caroline had clammed up immediately, crossly declaring that she scarcely had a moment to herself since Jonah had been born. Caroline hurried off to the parlor and returned a moment later with her reticule. "Here," she said, pulling out some money. "Jonah is growing so fast, he'll need some new clothes soon. Why don't you get some nice new fabric from the mercantile store? Maybe you'll see some ribbons for yourself, too," she added, giving Rose a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was just thinking I should make him some new clothes," Rose said with a chuckle. "He's got a good appetite, that's for sure. And thank you, Caroline, for letting me buy some ribbons, It's very thoughtful of you." Rose clasped Caroline's hand in her own as she took the money. "Are you sure you're okay? You would tell me if there was something I could help you with, wouldn't you?" Caroline nodded and blinked rapidly, looking close to tears. "I know I'm not the easiest person to live with," she said quietly. She sniffed and squared her shoulders again. "Silly me, getting emotional. I'm sure you'll have a lovely time. And look after him, won't you?" Rose darted a worried look at her sister, wondering what had come over her. "Of course, I love Jonah as if he were my own, Caroline. I'd never let him come to any harm. Are you sure you wouldn't like to come with us? I could wait an hour, and we could see if your headache has gone." "No, you go on. Make an afternoon of it. There's a quaint new tea shop near the mercantile store. You may as well stay out for a cup of tea as well." She thrust a few more coins in Rose's hand and hurried away to her bedroom. "What do you say, little Jonah? Shall we go and see the duck pond, and then visit Myrtle and Thomas at the mercantile? You know how much they adore you." Jonah babbled back at Rose as she chattered, and he twisted his head to watch her getting ready to go out. Maybe we could pick some flowers for Mama to cheer her up when we get back." She scooped him up and blew a raspberry on the soft skin of his neck, making him squeal with laughter in a way that filled her heart with joy. Rose's cheeks were dusted with a smattering of freckles by the time she and Jonah walked up the garden path later that day. The sun was sinking in the west, painting the sky with vivid streaks of coral, and Jonah's head was heavy against her shoulder as he dozed. They had stayed out longer than Rose had intended because Myrtle had insisted on baking a cake for Benjamin while she plied Rose with cool lemonade under the shade of the tree in her garden. "He's such a delightful little boy," she had cooed. Thomas had bashfully handed Rose a wooden spinning top that he had made. "He loves children," Myrtle had whispered after he hurried back inside. "The Lord never blessed us with our own, but Thomas would have made a wonderful father." Rose thought about Myrtle's words as she arrived home. Jonah was an easy baby in almost every way, and she wondered why Caroline had never taken to him, even when he cried for her attention in a way that almost broke Rose's heart. "We're home, and guess what? Myrtle has been baking again." Rose chuckled and put Jonah down on the floor. He crawled toward the parlor in a determined fashion as Rose put the cake down on the sideboard. "How are you feeling, Caroline?" Rose followed Jonah through the parlor door, but the room was empty, save for a fly bumping lazily against the window, trying to get out. She turned to leave, but suddenly noticed a letter propped up on the table next to Caroline's favorite chair. Rose walked toward it with a sense of foreboding. To Rose and Benjamin. Caroline's flowing writing boldly stated their names on the outside, and Rose picked the paper up with trembling fingers. She scooped Jonah up into her arms and hurried to Benjamin's room, knocking tentatively on the door. "Come in. Sorry, I think I fell asleep again." Benjamin tried to struggle up from the chair by the window and gave Rose a wry smile. "I'll get through a whole day without falling asleep soon. It's just these wretched scars keeping me awake at night." His words faded as he saw the anxiety and confusion in Rose's eyes. "Caroline has left this letter in her parlor." She handed it to Benjamin, but he folded his arms with a small shake of his head, not wanting to take it from her. "Will you read it, Rose? I don't think I dare." He turned his head to look out of the window before looking down at his scarred hands with a deep sigh. "I've got a horrible feeling I know what it's going to say." Rose sat Jonah on the floor and gave him one of his rag toys to play with. She opened the sheet of paper and started to read. "Dearest Benjamin and Rose, it is with a heavy heart that I write this letter to you. There is no good way to say this, so I'm just going to state what I must, without trying to dress it up. A few months ago, I discovered the matrimonial agency advertisement in your apron pocket, Rose. I have been corresponding with Arthur Miller since then, and we have fallen in love through our letters. He decided not to come to Blossom Creek after all, as he travels a lot with his business. By the time you read this letter, I will have left Blossom Creek to be with him. Benjamin, you know deep down that ours was not a happy marriage, so please don't come after me. I'm sorry that I wasn't always the best sister to you, Rose. I used to think you were second best to me, but in truth, I think you were always the better person out of the two of us. Please take good care of Jonah. I know that between you will figure out how to raise him far better than if he came with me. I don't think I'm cut out to be a mother. Arthur and I will enjoy traveling together instead, and he has more aspirations in life, which suits me well. I wish you both the best and pray that one day you might think fondly of me again, once you have gotten over me leaving. I have left Mama's locket for you, Rose, as something to remember her by. Yours sincerely, Caroline." Rose's voice shook with emotion as she read the final few words, her eyes filled with tears. "She's really gone, hasn't she?" Benjamin nodded sadly and looked up at Rose. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this, Rose. You deserved more than playing second fiddle to your sister all this time. I knew as soon as I had my accident that Caroline would never be able to stay with me. I'm not judging her badly for it, it's just not who she is." He sighed and leaned back in the chair. "She would never have been able to see past the scars, Rose. Maybe nobody ever will," he added quietly. "Don't say that. I know you, Benjamin, and you're so kind and honorable. I don't even notice your scars. It's what's in your heart that matters, not what you look like." Benjamin gave her a look of gratitude. "To be honest, part of me is relieved. All I ever wanted was for her to be happy, whether that's with me or not." Rose brushed her tears away and nodded slowly. "I think she will be. She always longed to travel to Europe. Perhaps one day she might write to me and tell me what she's doing. The thing is," Benjamin looked at Rose again, but couldn't finish what he needed to say. "I know. I can't continue to stay in this house with you. Not now that Caroline is gone. It would be most improper." Rose paced back and forth for a few moments. "I'll ask Emma and Jared if they would let me stay in one of the attic rooms at the Ponderosa. I'm sure they won't mind. I was going to ask Morris Selby if I could return to work in the next couple of weeks, even if it's just in a small way. I can't just mope in this room waiting for my scars to heal. I need to keep myself busy." Benjamin and Rose both looked at Jonah, who was babbling to himself with a happy smile on his face. "Emma adores him," Rose said quickly. "He could stay with me during the day, and I can bring him home. I mean here, when you get back from work in the evening." Benjamin nodded and shot her a grateful look. "I don't know how I would manage without you, Rose. We'll get through this, won't we?" Rose felt the emotion choking her throat and making it hard for her to speak as she pictured Caroline heading east again on the train, eager to start her new life with Mr. Miller. "I honestly believe the Lord will help us through this, Benjamin, and our new friends in Blossom Creek." She lifted her chin and gave him a tremulous smile. "A little adversity never hurt anyone. As long as little Jonah knows he's loved, we'll figure things out between us." Chapter 10. "How are you getting on, dear? I'm glad to see you've gotten a bit of color back in your cheeks these days." Myrtle passed Rose a cup of coffee and picked up her sewing again. "I know your sister's death was a terrible shock, but we're here to support you." Rose sipped her coffee and looked around the room at all the kindly faces surrounding her. She had almost decided not to come to Myrtle's quilting bee, but Emma had persuaded her, reminding her how Jonah loved to sit and play with the bobbins of yarn. Her thoughts drifted back to the day that Caroline had left Blossom Creek. Rose had packed her belongings up within an hour of reading the letter, and Benjamin had limped to the door to watch her walk up the street. What he hadn't seen were the tears pouring down her cheeks as Rose felt as though she was walking away from the one person who knew her better than anyone, and who would share her pain at Caroline's abrupt departure. Emma had busied herself making up a room for Rose, without asking more than the bare minimum, which Rose had been grateful for. She had insisted that Rose have an early night and had brought hot chocolate for her to drink, holding her hand as Rose had gradually unburdened herself about what Caroline had done. "Caroline is like a wild bird," Emma had finally said, giving Rose's hand a squeeze. "Some folks can't live the way we do. They find that marriage and family feel like being trapped in a cage. She's flown away now, and all you can do is wish her well." She had smiled fondly at Rose. "You're almost part of our family, and so many people in Blossom Creek admire Benjamin for what he's been through. I hope you'll both stay here in town. Things will get better, you'll see. Folks will have their own challenges in life to think about. You hold your head up high, and if anyone gossips saying it's a scandal, well, let the Lord be their judge, and you just smile and let it wash over you." Rose had fallen into a fitful sleep, plagued with dreams of Caroline, always just beyond her reach until the sky had finally paled into dawn. But as she was serving breakfast, the sheriff had appeared at the Ponderosa, asking to see Rose as a matter of urgency. "What's wrong? Is Benjamin okay? And Jonah?" She had torn her apron off, ready to run down the street, until he had put a hand on her arm to stop her. "We've had some terrible news, I'm afraid, Rose. It's about the stagecoach your sister was on. The horses bolted, and the wagon tipped over the edge of a steep gully. I'm sorry to say that Caroline and one other traveler were killed in the accident. There was nothing the driver could do to save them." Rose's legs had given way, and she had collapsed into his arms, scarcely able to take it in. But that had been 3 months ago, and now, as she sat in the quiet room sewing with Myrtle and Emma and some of the other ladies who she now counted as friends, she had come to find a sense of acceptance in Caroline's passing. That will be a beautiful piece to remember your sister by, Emma said, admiring Rose's fine stitching on the sampler she was making. Without thinking, Rose touched the locket at her neck, which Caroline had left behind for her, and smiled. Blue was always her favorite color. I'm going to sew all the things she loved most, and it will go in Jonah's bedroom as a keepsake for him. The talk turned to the harvest festival that was happening in a couple of weeks. I think it's high time you came back to our office to let us help you, Rose. Susan Lewis whispered her comment, leaning closer. We have so many kind gentlemen looking for someone just like you to marry. Rose blushed. I don't know, Susan. It feels too soon. Her words trailed off as she realized that she did feel lonely. We have one particular person in mind, Susan whispered, giving Rose a direct look. He will be perfect for you in every way. Please promise me you'll come and visit us after you've finished at the Ponderosa tomorrow. Trust us, Rose. We only have your best interests at heart. Rose nodded as Emma darted a small smile at Susan. She wondered if Emma was in on the secret and felt herself smiling despite her initial reservations. Okay, you've persuaded me, but it's only to find out a little more. That's all. I'm busy looking after Jonah, as you know, although Benjamin does so well with him. Sometimes I wonder if he'll stop needing me. She felt a pang of regret for a moment, before reminding herself that it was good that Benjamin was so close to Jonah. That's all sorted then, Susan said with a twinkle in her eye. Eleanor will be so pleased. She's been itching to help you get married, she added with a chuckle. Once she has the perfect match in mind, there's no stopping her. The following day, Emma insisted that Rose finish work as soon as they had cleared up from luncheon. I don't wear this dress anymore, Rose. Why don't you try it on for size? She appeared in the doorway of Rose's room, carrying a lovely deep blue sprigged calico dress. She held it up against Rose and nodded firmly. I knew it would suit you. It's perfect for your coloring, and it would make me very happy if you would wear it to go and visit Eleanor later today. Rose looked up from the socks she was darning. Do you think it's appropriate for me to be even considering marriage so soon? Don't say another word, Emma said hastily, draping the dress on Rose's bed before turning to face her. Rose, I've known you for a while now, and you're one of the kindest, most thoughtful people I've ever met. But now we all think it's time to think of yourself first for once. I trust Eleanor, and I know she wouldn't suggest a potential beau for you unless he was ideal. Rose gave Emma a wry smile. I guess I've run out of excuses then. You certainly have, Emma said firmly before grinning at her. I want to hear all about it when you get back as well. I'm a hopeless romantic, and I can't wait to see you happily married. An hour later, Rose smoothed down her new dress and patted her curls back into place. Her heart was bumping painfully in her chest, and she almost turned away, but then she remembered that Emma had said it was normal to feel like that. The door of the Happy Hearts matrimonial agency tinkled as she opened it and hesitantly stepped into the cool interior. You came! Susan rushed out from behind her desk and clasped Rose's hands in her own, as though she was worried she might leave again. Emma didn't give me much choice, Rose said with a nervous laugh. Now then, my dear, why don't you sit down and have a glass of lemonade while I tell you about the gentleman I have in mind for you? Susan propelled her into the nearest chair, and Eleanor put some refreshments on the table next to her. So this gentleman is very well respected in town. He's been through some difficult times, but now he would like to find a bride of his own. Eleanor referred to the notes in front of her before looking up again. He would very much like to have a family. Presumably you would like that too? Rose nodded, her mouth feeling suddenly dry. Yes, I like children very much. An image of Jonah's smile filled her mind, and she felt a sudden pang of worry. This gentleman, he won't stop me looking after Jonah, will he? I can't be with anyone who would stop me from seeing Jonah. He's very precious to me. Eleanor flicked through her notes and paused for a moment. I did mention that to him, actually, dear. He seemed very understanding. And would you be happy to remain living in Blossom Creek? He is quite particular about that. Rose smiled quickly. Of course. This is my home now. I'd hate to leave. Eleanor and Susan exchanged glances and nodded happily at one another, pleased with her answers. Usually we recommend our candidates correspond for a while to get to know one another. Often the ladies live on the East Coast, as you know. What Eleanor's trying to say, Susan interjected, almost bouncing in her seat with excitement, is that this situation is a bit different because you both live in Blossom Creek already. She darted a look at the street through their window. We thought it would be nice for you both to meet. He's waiting in the park, and Eleanor can take you there and act as chaperone. Rose's mouth gaped open in surprise. Are you sure? I don't want to set tongues wagging. I thought I would have time to think about things for a while. Eleanor stood up and tightened her shawl. There's no time like the present, Rose. I know you're going to hit it off. I can just feel it in my bones. She linked arms with her, and Susan hurried past them to open the door and let them out with a beaming smile. She fell into step next to Eleanor and chuckled. Susan told me you're a force to be reckoned with when it comes to matchmaking. I'm beginning to see what she meant now. Eleanor squeezed Rose's arm. Sometimes it's not so much matchmaking as just giving two people a little nudge in the right direction. This gentleman is right for you. I just know it. They turned the corner, and the park gates came into view. The sun was low in the sky, shining directly into Rose's eyes, and she felt her heart beat faster as she saw a figure deep in the shadow of the gnarled old tree just inside the gate. This is as far as I'll come, Eleanor said quickly. I shall stay here so there's no impropriety, but the gentleman I have in mind for you is that man there, under the tree. Why don't you go and introduce yourself? He's looking forward to meeting you. She gave Rose an encouraging smile. Go on, I know you're both perfect for each other. Rose took a shaky breath and turned into the gate. As she came closer to the tree, the figure stepped out from the shadows. Benjamin? It made no sense, and she stopped in her tracks. What are you doing? Why are you here? Are you the person Eleanor and Susan are talking about, who's looking for a bride? I don't understand. Rose felt her heart somersault in her chest as she saw that he wasn't using his sticks to walk anymore, even though her head was buzzing with confusion and a torrent of emotions. I hope you don't mind, but I asked Eleanor and Susan for their help. I'm here because I have something to tell you. Benjamin slowly stepped toward her, stopping just in front of her. I've loved you for so long, Rose. I love everything about you, and I had to bury that love deep in my heart because I was already married to someone else. He took Rose's hands in his own and held them against his chest. I know we've been through difficult times, but when I fall asleep at night, it's your beautiful face I see in my mind just as I'm closing my eyes. Rose gasped as she took in his words, her heart starting to lift with joy. I've prayed about this for so long, Benjamin, telling myself that what was between us was just friendship and could never be anything more. But the truth is, it's the same for me. I have to confess that I love you too, but I never dared hope you might feel the same way. Will you do me the honor of being my wife, Rose, and Jonah's mother? We can't imagine a life without you in it. Please say you'll come home again. As my wife? Benjamin looked deep into Rose's hazel eyes, which crinkled slightly at the edge as her mouth curved into a smile. Nothing would make me happier, Benjamin. Before she could finish her words, Benjamin swept Rose into his arms and gently kissed her. For one blissful moment, it was as if they were the only two people in the whole wide world, and Rose's pulse raced as she melted into his embrace, feeling the comforting strength of his chest against her. You see, I always know when a couple should be together. Eleanor's laughing words reached them on the warm summer breeze, and Rose and Benjamin stepped apart again. I'd better escort you back to the Ponderosa, Rose. We've got a wedding to prepare for, and I know Emma will want it to be the best day ever for you both. And I need to go and collect Jonah from Myrtle and tell them the good news. Benjamin took Rose's hand in his own again before she was out of his reach. This is the start of a wonderful new life for us, Rose. I feel it in my heart, and I know we'll be blessed with much happiness. Rose nodded with tears of joy shining in her eyes. I know, Benjamin. I know. I think Caroline felt all along that we were meant to be together as well. Her memory will live on through dear little Jonah, and together we will make our own little family too, here in Blossom Creek, under the big skies of Montana. This is our home, and our future will be filled with love and happiness together. Benjamin swept her into another embrace and gently kissed her again. I promise I will always cherish you, Rose. Fate brought us together, and you make me the happiest man alive. The end. Thank you for listening to this free audiobook, and we hope you enjoyed it. Martha Gillcrest writes clean romance stories that sweep you away to when times were simpler, with plenty of love and adventure to entertain you. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like it with a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. That way, you will always know when a new audiobook has been added for your listening pleasure.